Welcome to the Independent Characters, episode 174. This is Carl.
This is Austin.
This is Jody.
Again, thank you guys for joining me as guest hosts again. It's awesome to have you back.
Good.
Thanks for having us.
We have been playing some Kill Team in Necromunda. This show is Necromunda versus Kill Team. There's been a lot of discussion, as you'll hear me say repeatedly throughout the episode, about Games Workshop's latest infatuation with skirmish games, and is there room for this many skirmish games within Games Workshop and their fan base. So you'll hear what our thoughts are first on Necromunda, then on Kill Team, and then whether these two can coexist or not, and in our opinion. But I think we've had a ton of experience lately with the new Kill Team, even so I apparently been making huge mistakes left and right. So nothing new there. Never said I was an expert. Yeah, so you guys, again, Jody, your summer's starting to run out here. You're a teacher in real life.
Yeah.
So we know that you're running out of time, but I really appreciate any time you come on the show because I think you're just so great at presenting.
Thanks, man.
So thank you for joining in. Austin, still our newest member to the group, but
still here.
We're still super excited you're here. So
yeah. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for coming over and playing with Anthony and just hanging out. And anytime you want to hang out,
It's always fun.
Know.
Yeah.
So, and in fact, Ian,
Yep.
your friend that I played at Adepticon this year, I keep wanting to say last year, but earlier this year, and how you and I met is coming out to the area.
Yeah, in
so
a couple weeks.
We're going to do a
Awesome.
small group of
About a
us
week,
playing 40K
Sweet.
over at my place. So we'll send out those invites to those who are in the area. Okay, last thing I just want to mention before we even get started, you'll hear in this that Kill Team is played on a unique size mat, which is 22 inches by 30 inches, which makes it very fast, very furious, close quarters combat, that kind of thing going on. Our friends over at Table War, Doug and Todd, have come up with 4 double-sided mats, which are incredible looking. They're kind of subsections of mats they already have, so they work out just perfect. You're kind of familiar with them. These mats are $55 each. Again, that's two-sided, so you're getting 2 different play surfaces, if you will. They're made of the same material that the fat mat that you know and love is made out of. The mats are for the month of August are $5 off right now, which is fantastic. But in addition to that, we have been given a code by Table War. When that code is, and get out your pens and pencils, that code, it'll be in the show notes as well, is IC 2018-08. And so again, that's IC 201808. That code gets you an additional 10% off, meaning if you buy one of these $55 Kill Team mats, you're getting the $5 discount, then you're getting another 10% off that. That brings that mat down to $45. Again, two-sided, that's fantastic. But if you buy a 4-pack of mats, which they currently have discounted from $220 to $180, you get a further 10% off that, bringing it down to $162. That's plus shipping, which is actually fairly reasonable.
Awesome.
I think it cost me $15 for shipping.
Super good deal. If you're an existing player with a bunch of existing terrain, that is a great way to get your Kill Team variety and fix going deep.
Yeah, and let me tell you, I mean, you could tape off a section on a mat, but that's such a hassle. But these also come with small bags that they fit in. You can actually fit 2 of these Kill Team mats in one of those bags.
Oh, wow.
So you could really just roll up your mat, grab your box of terrain and your little Kill Team force and go. Super convenient, and we all know we love rolling dice on those mats. So
so soothing.
Help us out using this code. Lets Table War know that their advertisement dollars or lack thereof. No, all kidding aside, it lets them know that their money is well spent when advertising with the independent characters. So please do use this code, do get a discount, and do get these cool mats, which if you're playing Kill Team, you absolutely are going to want. Okay, so that's enough shilling for the man. But I'm really glad the two of you have joined me again. Thank you so much. I think next episode, I'm not sure who we're having on. Maybe Justin and Adon again. We'll figure that out as we cross that bridge. But we do hope you enjoy episode 174, Necromunda versus Kill Team. The last thing I wanted to add, and I forgot to mention this at the end of the show, is my buddy Dan, who I work with. You've heard the opening music to the show time and time again. That was his old band that play that music, and he is the drummer for that band. And that band had kind of fallen apart a while ago. He has he's into like the punk and hard rock and that kind of thing. Really, really, really talented drummer. I've included a couple tracks at the end of the show here after the credits and everything from his new band. So if you're interested, take a listen. It might be your style, it might not.
Very cool.
But I felt like it was only fair to give him credit.
Oh, that's awesome.
Where credit's due. So thank you so much, and we hope you enjoy the show. Wargamma.com, where you can get resin terrain, craters, lakes, lava pools, and objectives. Figure bases for all types of models. Character models including Battle Wolf war mounts and spawn seeds. Linked barricades. Choose from one of 6 designs to suit the origins of your army. From Star Pharaoh, Spawn Hive, Mechanoid, Dark Ancients, Dradelian Noble, and Chromag Scrapyard. Linked barricade sets include 12 large shields, which are 2 inches wide, and 4 connecting walls. Cover nearly a 30-inch line. Sets also include a matching multi-gun turret. Wargamma.com. Alternative battle miniatures. All right, so as usual, we're going to kick it off with a little bit of hobby progress, and I think the order we're going to go in here is I'll go first, since I appear to have achieved the least, and then we'll go Austin and then Jody. But so here's what I've done. I've been assembling Necromunda gangs. I got my Goliaths assembled, which, by the way, these models are incredible. I don't know if you put yours together.
No, I just have seen enough of them and oogled them that they're super good looking.
They're
models.
incredible. And there's one piece that, like, as I was assembling them, I was posting, people kept saying, "Oh, did you lose the cigar yet?" Because there's one guy that has a cigar sticking out of his mouth. And then I saw, I think it was Andy Hoare said, "Let me tell you the secret to the cigar." On our Facebook group, he said the trick is leave it on the sprue, put a dollop of glue on it, and then put the head against the cigar, then cut the cigar off the sprue. Oh. So I followed his instructions. I did not lose my cigar, and it came out perfect. So I love these guys. Like, I've not played this gang yet, so I'm very curious to actually play this gang and try that game. So I got all those guys assembled. I've been working on Magnus. I started doing some OSL work on Magnus, which I'll show the two of you later. He's up there in a box.
Yeah, what is online? He
I
looks
will
great.
Finish him. It looked great. Yeah. It came out great. I was actually, when I first did it, and I know the technique for doing it, but when I first did it, I thought, I overdid the brightest point of it. And then the more I looked at it, the more I appreciated how it came out.
Right.
So, and the strange thing about that is, one of the pieces that I was doing the OSL for is a globe, which is kind of on the end of his staff. And I'd never done like a globe before. I'd always done like something coming from a point, like a globe, and so that took a bit of thinking and looking on the internet to see, how did other people do this?
Yeah, it's weird. There's only, in a strange sense, from talking to and going to workshops with some really high-end painters, and we joke on the show about like somebody doing freehand. It's like, I just painted a triangle, and then
that's Bryce.
Bryce,
a couple triangles,
but in a weird way, there's like squares, there's triangles, and there's spheres,
right?
And it's one of those, and then just thinking in those terms. But it is, at first, it's like, well, why should I paint the OSL or the lighting effect on this weapon this way? Well, because it's a sphere sitting against a rectangle.
Right.
And you go, well, then the light makes sense. And but getting your brain to make that transition and learning each one of them, it's weird. I
am really happy with the way it came out. I do need to finish this model. Like, I've just been bouncing around from thing to thing to thing. And part of it is just because things just are coming out so fast.
Amen.
Sure. And it's throwing me off. But I do need to finish them, because then I can actually use them with my Thousand Suns list at some point.
Yeah.
But
I also find too that you got to get through the ugly stage sometimes when you're airbrushing, right?
Oh,
or at least for me, perspective wise, especially when I'm trying to experiment with a new technique or new color.
Yeah.
At first I'm like, oh God, this looks awful.
Yeah.
And then you got to give it a few days or keep working with it and get through that ugly stage. And,
There's also, I've failed, like when I was doing bases for one army, I was trying to imitate kind of how Dave Paints does his bases, which really just kind of draws the eye to a spotlight.
Yes, it does.
And I was doing that and I was like, just not getting the effect I wanted. And then I was like, well, I'm just going to dry brush this third color onto it. And as soon as I did that, I was like, oh, now it all works. Okay. I like, sometimes it's just that third color that makes a huge difference.
It's crazy how it just comes together.
That is
sometimes.
You're like, when I do my hobby progress, one of the models I'm going to talk about that I worked on, that is the story of that model.
Right.
Yeah.
That is.
I think we all can probably
happened.
have a story similar to that.
I received finally my bases from Dragonforge. My $500 Dragonforge order.
4 months?
I think when I actually finally committed the order, because I thought I had and didn't. I think it was.
I think we were talking
end of
about it
April.
at Adepticon.
Yeah,
this past year.
But I think, I had not committed it at that point, though. I thought I had, and I did not.
Right.
And then I finally realized, oh, wait a minute, I never clicked buy on this order. So those arrived, and man, the bases look great. Yeah. I mean, it's not worth the wait for some people, but when I'm doing an entire army, so I've been spending a bunch of time washing them in dishwashing detergent and just getting them prepared to start painting. And it's taken a while because it's a lot. It's a lot of bases.
How many total bases did you get?
I can't even tell you, but it's well over 200 and something. Because it's just alone, I think I had like 132 millimeter bases. I mean, the army is massive.
Right.
So, I've been getting those cleaned up. I've been talking a little bit with Colin on, how do you think I should approach this painting? So I'm going to try a couple things. The key to me is fast but looks good. So especially when I'm doing because I'm going to do it all, or at least a huge amount of it at one time.
Right.
So it's probably going to be, I'm guessing, over black, a dark gray, then a light gray, or then a wash, and maybe a dry brush type situation.
Right.
Because I want it to look kind of concrete-ish. So
something both Brian and Colin have kind of hit me to is when doing a concrete pattern or a stone pattern like that. One of the things that's really valuable is with that wash you mentioned. Yeah. Make that a color. Pick something, a green, a blue, and really drop that in. And it's amazing how much it brings that to life. The buildings I'll be talking about in just a minute. They just got rattle canned so far, what I showed you guys, but that will definitely be one of the next steps, is to go in and set some of those background. And then you kind of dry brush over them or something and fade those colors back. But if you think about like Colin's Demon Zinch army, he's got those pinks and purples, and it's a little more pronounced in that army for obvious reasons as Zinch demons. But it's that idea, and it's amazing how much life it brings to that. Also, if when you get to that point you want to do a paint day, let me know, because I've done that before, of painting 100 and something bases in a sitting. And it makes you want to eat glass.
I like fairly repetitive.
Yeah. I like that idea. I mean, it just adds another layer of depth, character, to a base that would, just be normal, brown, gray, or whatever.
Yeah, little green, little blue, something like that. And it's shocking.
I think blue would probably work really well, like a and then if you go back over it and dull it a bit, I think that might
the
work.
orangey brass color.
I'll have to figure out what will work against the brass of the Minotaur. So okay, so got all the bases. I'm starting to clean them out. I assembled my Kill Team box set of terrain that I had received, and boy, is that terrain nice looking.
Yeah,
it's really nice looking. On top of that, I bought a bunch of coin collector sleeves, which I'll include a link to in the show notes, for the cardboard tokens that go in that come with Kill Team, the round ones.
Yeah,
those I have found work really great for being able to pick up and find and locate, but they also protect those really well.
Right.
I did the same thing with the Shadow Wars Armageddon tokens at the time, and I've basically just taken those tokens and dumped them in my Kill Team box now, because you can use them for whatever you guys agree upon. Hey, this is the one for aiming. Okay, great.
Right.
I bought the Sector Imperialis Sanctum and the Sector Imperialis Basilicanum, which are the two pieces of the Kill Team terrain that come with the statues. So both the big statues and the small statues across the top. These are just incredible terrain kits.
I really dig the statue. I mean, it's the centerpiece. Yeah.
I was shocked at the scale of that thing. I mean, it's
huge.
almost as big as the Marine statue, the old Marine kit.
right.
Yeah, like they're just a little more slight, but I mean, on that same scale, which is just awesome.
But I would say, I mean, this is a pretty pricey piece. This is like $100 in the U.S. box set. And when I saw that, I thought, oh man, that's pretty steep. But then when you see the scale of the building too, like this is there's quite a bit in this box. So you could make multiple building or ruins out of this if you wanted to.
And they do stack just like the original.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'm very happy with the sets. I have not even opened them yet, as you can see on my desk. But got the data cards too. Really enjoying Kill Team. We'll talk about games played in a little bit. So I got the blank cards for that.
Yep.
And then, as I talked about at the opening of the show, I placed an order for the Table War mats that are used for Kill Team that are 22 inches by 30 inches. They're double-sided. I bought the 4-pack from them.
Sweet.
And that I'm super excited about. Because, I mean, the cardboard that it comes with is great and all, but I've really gotten spoiled by rolling on those Table War mats.
Yeah, isn't that a strangest thing about those mats, that it's the rolling dice and the little, like, the gentle little bounce, and
that
it's something about it so I don't know, it's really
you
nice.
Put your
it's
hand
weird.
on it, it doesn't scrape up your knuckles like my sandboards,
You can spill drinks on it, and it wipes right up.
As we saw when I spilled my soda on them. So, yeah, there you go. That was me. Let's go to you, Austin.
Well, I tell you what, I think the month of July, I came into that month with a hobby goal of using that 1 hour a night.
Oh, really?
Once the baby goes to bed, house is cleaned up, I disappear and I start hobbying. I tell you what, I had probably the most progress I've had in my entire hobby career. And I think personally I'm seeing the end to the tunnel of my second army with AdMech.
Wow.
Pretty close. Everything's fully built at this point.
Yeah.
Some of the things that I put together, 4 Castellan robots. I've got 3 Sidonian Dragoons built. The Castellan robots have been primed, base painted, started doing some highlighting with the airbrush.
What is it about that army that appeals to you?
I remember the episode you guys did. I don't know if it was about a year or 2 ago.
Sure.
Colin was on it, but it's kind of...
I think it was Colin and Michael Dunsmore was on that.
Yeah,
one.
that's right.
Yeah.
I think there's a hidden level of creepiness
Yeah.
with that army that's not like transparent visibly, but when you first kind of dive in looking at the models, and I remember Colin kind of picking out the 3 Sidonian Dragoons and how there's this like half body kind of like hung in the body of the robot, and everything's like plugged into it. I'm like, oh man, I got to check this out.
Horrifying.
Oh, it really is.
Yeah.
It really is. And when I think about 40K, I don't think of anything happy, obviously, or like tongue in cheek.
You don't think the cherubs are happy?
Yeah, exactly. Right. I think it's the fanaticism about it too attracts that to me. It's almost cult-like, right? But on the side of the Imperium.
Literally is cult-like.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
Mechanicum.
And that level of kind of 1950s science fiction as well kind of appeals to me too, just being a big fan of just science fiction in general. The Castellan robots are kind of did that for me. So
I'd love to see the Castellan robots make an appearance in Kill Team at some point.
Oh, boy.
It just make like in a weird way. I'm like, no, it makes sense.
I think one model would be 100 points, right?
Cool. Yes.
Right.
Do that. But it would just be this neat idea of like, maybe there's a mech, not a servitor. What's the controller called?
The data smith. Yeah.
Yeah. The data smith and his robot, and they're walking into like just smashing through walls. And just like you said, like 1950s robot style.
Right.
Like, nope. We are coming to collect this, and that's it. And
goodbye.
Yeah.
Game over. Right.
Yeah. Pick it up and we're going. Yeah. But like a squad versus the big monster thing is, getting way ahead of ourselves. But
that is one
I'd
of the things that I like about
that.
Zone Mortalis is that you could have like a dreadnought then like these guys like just made for a kind of neat interaction. But as you said, we're getting ahead of ourselves. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. So what else?
A little bit more. So I've been working on an Imperial Knight for about 6 months.
Oh yeah.
Before I even moved here. Right. Okay. So it's been.
I'm not there's no criticism here, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Magnus has been taking me a year.
That's right. It's off the sprue. Hey, it's built. I've got it magnetized, so I can do the weapon loadouts. It was my first attempt at really doing heavy duty, green stuff, magnets, and intimidating at first. I scoured the internet, YouTube, read blogs, but when you get down to it, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
So that's fun. Everything's kind of put apart. I'm starting to mask it, kind of come up with like a color pattern that I like.
That's the hardest thing, I think.
It really is with the Knights too, because
yeah. Anytime you go to paint a Marine army, it's like, okay, well,
blue,
or this or that,
yellow,
but if you, it's, I think coming up with the color that you're gonna live with it forever.
Right. Well,
Right.
more so than your traditional, like, I painted a Space Marine or an Orc or whatever. A Knight's a real investment. That is not only an investment financially, but of time. That I really got to be sure I'm going to like this. And
yeah,
I think that's what's taken me so long to get to this stage. Is am I doing diagonal stripes or am I doing cross patterns? Is it going to be yellow? Is it going to be blue? A
lot of internet searching.
Oh yeah, a lot of images right before bed of just like, oh, this looks cool. And then plus I kind of want to look at some of the stories behind some of these Knights, or do I want to kind of create my own?
Yep.
And there hasn't been a story yet that's really captured me, and then also captured me from the look standpoint together. And that's been
I have
kinda
the
tough
same
to-
problem. Like I'll like the backstory here, but I don't like that color scheme. And yeah,
I was lucky that got me over the hump. That was exactly how I settled on my Knights. I liked the story, and then I was like, oh, that color scheme's cool. Done.
It's been tough. Yeah.
Except that I immediately was like, man, I wish I would have done something with a little more snazzy with checkerboards. And
Yep.
Yeah.
I was like, damn it. No.
And that's the thing. Now I'm experimenting with these, checkerboards, hazard striping. Never done this before. Why choose this model to do that on first?
Right.
And then I'm kind of sitting there just really intimidated with that.
practice on a piece of cardboard or something.
Exactly.
And I will say, for me, I found of the building and messing with Knights, the painting of the Knight for me, and your mileage may vary, was actually the most enjoyable part. Because once you take the armor plates off, and I hope I'm not throwing salt in the wound here in a second, but leave the armor plates off of the Knight, and then leave the endoskeleton, as it were, intact. And then that's basically paint it silver, wash it, highlight it, but then take your time with the plates separate.
Right.
And they're easy to work with, and they're easy to get at, and then you kind of glue them all on at the end. And in the meantime, you got this Terminator robot thing standing there staring at you, keeping you motivated.
Accusingly.
Yeah. Why haven't you finished me
Why
yet?
am I naked? Give me my underpants. Send me to war. But
I will say that's the method I went with. YouTube actually proved worthy, right? But I learned my lesson from building Gilliman completely through, and then I have this model with so much detail, and I'm trying to stick this paintbrush in, and okay.
There are some models that just are best painted in sub-assembly.
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
Knight is absolutely hands down one of them.
Yeah, and
Yep,
it
I would
actually
agree.
takes it to, for me, I found it to be the painting of them pretty enjoyable. Once you get to the point of, exactly as you said, Carl, once you're like, this is what I'm doing.
And that's where the airbrush has just been a great tool for those bigger surface areas.
Yep.
So anyways, got a couple more things, just random troops I've been working on, Electropriests, which are probably my least favorite looking troop in the army or in the entire GW catalog. I don't know.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
They were fun to paint, but just not a big fan of them.
Those guys, the jazz hands guys, right?
The jazz hands are holding a staff, but yes, they are the jazz hands guys,
I
right?
think those are the ones Colin hated painting.
He might have hated
If I
painting them,
remember correctly.
but he liked breaking them off on you on the tabletop.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I just, I did the big robots friend, a data smith and a tech priest to go along with it.
Yeah.
I'm approaching that full army at this point.
Nice.
So, the end is near.
All right. Awesome.
And then on top of this, I mentioned before we got started, some oil washes came in the mail today, and then the 4 other steps on top of it that I'll experiment with.
Get back to me. I've been hesitant.
Yeah, I'll let you know. So we'll see how that goes.
I kind of want somebody right there as I do it. I've been walked through the process so many times now, but I'm really just I need to experience holding my hands like in Ghost.
I kind of want that with everything.
All covered in oil paint. And the Top Gun,
That's right.
oiled up, and it got dark fast.
It was like a pottery scene. Yeah.
Yeah, too grim dark, both grim and dark.
Anyways, That's all I got.
Speaking of Ghost, how's your Slanesh? Jody, what have you been up to?
I've been. It was the carpe the diem out of my summer. The end grows nigh. I have to return to being like an adult and working and
I am
stuff.
shocked at how fast summer goes. My wife being a teacher as well. I'm like, what? Your summer vacation is almost over already?
Yeah.
I will never make fun of a teacher or say to a teacher, yeah, but you get all summer off again. Never.
Nope. Yeah, it gives you a month to catch up on all the stuff you didn't do.
Right.
And then you get like a week of like, better start getting ready for next year.
Yeah.
So this was that window. So last time I was on, I talked about wanting to finish up my Khorne Demon Army. Did it. If you look back on those old show notes, you can see pictures of the army all based up.
Yep.
Was real happy with how that finally came together. Then realized I had never finished some conversions for heralds. So I, as Brian, the Blood Throne model is, I would put it right up there with Austin's dislike of Electro Priest. The Blood Throne is, I've adopted, Brian calls it the Segway of Khorne. It's just I don't know what was going on with that one. So I took a Chaos Chariot and put the Herald inside of that with the big beast thing that's pulling it.
Yeah.
And that conversion came together really easy. It was pretty plug and play for dropping the actual throne bit down inside of the chariot, and got those done. I picked up a long time ago I kickstarted a model for my Slanesh army. That company has since gone under. Somebody else has bought the rights to them. In the show notes for this show, I'll throw up a picture of this model. But it's a winged Slanesh Demon Prince. The company that originally made it was called Troll Outpost. If you like the model, you can pick it up through Zealot Miniatures is the company that has the rights to it now. Huge model, much bigger than I'd realized, but makes for an awesome Slanesh winged demon prince. Kind of has that labyrinth Guillermo del Toro like skin face thing where it's like just pulled down flesh with teeth showing underneath.
Very cool.
If you saw Hellboy 2, the tooth fairies,
Yep.
it looks like a giant muscled up one of those.
Nice.
I was really happy to get that done finally. It was a really fun model to paint. Did it in my red and purple Slanesh scheme. And then that brought me around to last time I was on, we talked about my Soul Grinder project. And I do want to give a quick shout out to the handful of folks who reached out to me that they had a Forge or a Plague Hulk out there. I have one now. So thank you to the folks who reached out to me. And I built and finished what I'm calling the Pleasure Grinder, the Slanesh Soul Grinder. So they all have names.
Just to remind people, you are doing one Soul Grinder from each of the gods.
Right,
And this is a 40K podcast, right?
Yeah.
The Pleasure Grinder.
Well, I have the
Nice.
I have the Tzeentch Fate Grinder,
Right.
and then the Khorne Rage Grinder,
Right.
and the
Okay.
Slanesh Pleasure Grinder, and then the Plague Hulk.
Okay.
Because Nurgle got to be different. But yeah, that model. The Pleasure Grinder was a real chore, a grind, you might say, to get through. I had a bunch of kind of disjointed ideas about what I wanted it to look like. And it's also the only one that was going to remain vaguely true to the original Soul Grinder kit.
Okay.
The other ones are all fairly substantial departures from that kit. It kind of uses the torso and the legs, and then whereas this one I knew was going to have that original Soul Grinder head still, because to me it looks kind of
Slanesh-y.
horse-like, cow-like a little bit.
Yeah.
Enough so. So there was a lot of just trial and error and digging through the bits box. Luckily had leftover parts of a very old metal Keeper of Secrets, the cow god one that's pretty awful now. So his head is on the back of the claw. His sword got worked into the Soul Grinder's weapon that they can have a blade.
Yeah.
Which probably should have been the warp claw, but the idea of getting something Slanesh-y, more Slanesh-y iconography worked worked out. And in the end, it
looks amazing.
Thank you.
It truly does.
Your choice of colors and the way you blended them, and just the armor plating, it looks incredible.
Thank you.
It is really, really cool. It's interesting. You've done now 3.
Yep.
The Plague Hulk will be the last one.
Yep.
I'm curious to see how that goes once you get to it.
Do you mind posting the other 2?
No, I'll get to. Well, I'll post a picture of all 4 of them once I get all 4 of them done.
There we go. Family portrait then.
Yeah,
right?
if you dig back,
portrait.
if you search through my stuff here and there,
You can
certainly
find
on One
them.
Hour Night, you can find them. But until all 4 are done.
Sure.
And we talk about hobby commitments. There's some steps before I can even get to the Plague Hulk. Now, the Plague Hulk, though, blessedly, is painted in my head already. Like,
Right, okay.
it is not like this one.
You already have a concept.
Yeah, this one I went into going, I have some, like I said, disjointed ideas. So exactly as you were saying, that ugly phase lasted for 2 weeks. I mean, it was an ugly phase of building.
It can lead to hobby stagnation too if you can't just pull the trigger.
Yeah,
and
and
get it
being
started, right?
Yeah.
here and knowing I was going to have to talk about it became my like, nope. Whenever we're recording next, that's the deadline when it has to
Got
be
it.
done. Literally before I brought it over, I did the final because
Boy, good thing we delayed the show.
well, it would have been done. I'll talk about some other things that got done in the interim to save my sanity. But yeah, like there's multiple clear coat styles on it. Its flesh is a dull coat, whereas its armor plating is a satin. And
I tell you, the armor plating. I mean, just kind of looking at different angles,
shading on it.
and I'm telling you, you kind of touched on it. Scale 75, those paints, and the purple metallic is just really appealing to the look of the eye, and it just kind of. It's almost like an illusion sometimes, and I don't know.
Right, and that's
looks really good.
Thank you. There's so metallic paints through an airbrush are super tricky. Kind of like if you've ever rattle canned a metallic paint, it looks like you're spraying glitter a little bit.
Yeah.
The scale 75 metallics, the pigment is fine enough that it'll blow through my Sotar, which a lot of people go like, oh no, because they jam up. And I'm like, look, if it's not jamming through a Sotar, it's not going to jam.
Right.
Like, or you've got your pressure too low or something. So it's just the purple of theirs through there over a black coat or a black base coat, and then kind of withdrawing my hand as I go to get a fade on the outer edge.
And what PSI are you running at? Usually
For the
when you do these
metallics, right around 20.
20.
Right around 20. And then I sprayed over that entire thing, which is actually something Caleb mentioned to me at a swap meet. I had a table next to Caleb, and we just got to chatting paint and stuff. And he was like, oh, what about shooting the GW washes through your airbrush? And I was like, what's it doing? He goes, well, it's weird. I was like, weird how? And he's like, it's just weird. He's right. I don't know that I can explain it either. It doesn't, it kind of goes on like a glaze, but it's kind of thicker than a glaze. So it's not just a color filter, and you got to be a little bit careful with keeping your PSI low. But once you get it, that's what causes that like mirage-y effect.
Cool.
Like, so the metallic gets knocked back just enough that it doesn't look just like a flat metallic color. It's kind of got this weird glaze over the top.
I'll have to experiment on my night with it.
I think that would be
not
beautiful.
really though.
Beautiful. Yeah. Slashy purple night. I like it. That was about the 4th different attempt I made at those leg plates to get them there. And then I went like, oh, and once I saw it, it was like, oh, that's perfect. I got it. Yeah. I'm happy with this.
Right.
But there were 4 other combinations of things that didn't work prior to that. And so it was one of those projects.
So if you run into something that you don't like with one of the plates, do you just strip it, or do you kind of just
Go over it.
Go over it again.
Beauty of an airbrush. Paint over it again.
Yeah.
And it saves me. It's faster to just.
This is the
blow
thing
over it.
that I learned in Caleb and Kat's class, the CK Studios classes, because you're doing a lot. Anytime I screw up, they're just like, oh, you just go back and correct.
It's such
it.
a thin layer, right?
I mean, none of us in this room. I mean, Jody's an amazing painter. But none of us is trying to paint Golden Demon.
No. Sure.
You know,
what are you talking about, Carl? 1 hour a night.
1 hour a night, Golden Demon.
Right.
It's 365 hours. I've applied to the Space Marine.
To just the bolt rifle, and
Yes. It has taken me a year to paint Magnus. It does not show. It's taken me a year. But yeah, I mean, you can go back and correct many, many times over something actually until you can get it right. It's just mostly a hassle of switching the color of the paint and the thing again, you know. But
well, and this was so many sub assemblies too that there was that issue of going like, all right, it's in a sub assembly. All right, painted it. Now we put it together with poster tack. Nope, that doesn't work. Now pull it all back apart.
Well, that's a hassle.
I mean, it was the nature of the beast with this thing. So let me move on to the last thing that hobby wise I've been doing. My school has a brand new 3D printer. for this year for our students. And my woodshop teacher, that is not in his wheelhouse. He's somebody I work real closely with. So he said, well, hey, if you take it home for the summer and when you come back, coach me up on how to use it so I can train the students.
And you were like,
you can go ahead and
twist
use it.
my arm.
Yeah, I was like, sweet, done. So I've been printing up all kinds of terrains for Shadespire, for 40K, well, actually not just for 40K. I wanted to specifically to find something multi-game functional.
Age of Sigmar, 40K, whatever.
Right. And so I found a file that I liked. Thingiverse is a great spot to get free files that you can take into your what they call a slicing program that will take this STL build file and then chop it down so the 3D printer can read it and print the layers. The printer I was using, because somebody's going to want to know, is called Raise 3D N2 printer. It's a larger bed printer. It's got about almost, I'd say 12 inches by 18 inches print area of like an object of up to those dimensions it can print. It's not difficult. This printer is particularly user friendly, which is why we bought it for student use.
So let me just stop you right there,
Okay.
because we said the first thing somebody's going to ask is, which printer did you use? Because that was the first question I asked you when you showed me, over Instant Messenger. I said, hey, what printer is that? Because me being me, I was like, I'm going to run out and go get this printer. This looks amazing, the stuff you're making. And then I looked that printer up and I'm like, oh, this is like a $2,700 printer or $3,500 printer, somewhere in that range. I was like, oh, maybe I'm not running out and buying this printer. But now I'm kind of really jealous of your printer. I'm not jealous enough to go buy one, though.
No, and to get to the TLDR on this, and I'll give a little bit more detail and background for a minute here. But the future is not here yet. The industry's falling apart. Their 3D printing is the future. There's no reason to buy models anymore. Just 3D print them. From what I'm seeing, we're not there. And I guess the short kind of anecdotal version of that, to take it a little further, is Carl, you and I and some other folks were looking at ordering some terrain online,
right,
just recently,
right,
fully painted, ready to go, take it out of the box, play with it. Austin, you had some you'd already purchased.
Yeah, great looking models. Stuff. It's just they're halfway around the world.
Yeah, they're on the other side of the world, and shipping is cost prohibitive. Yeah. At the time, if I factored in the amount, admittedly a cheaper 3D printer would cost, the amount of time it would take to print, which is not fast. And I will throw a picture again up in the show notes of on the Facebook group of what I have printed, so you can get an idea of what it looks like. It's not fast. The bottom layer of a building is about 12 hours. The two upper layers of a 3-story building take about 14 hours, and that's on low resolution, fast speed printing.
Right.
So what's the max scale on that then? Like, so high res? Yeah,
high res, and you're looking at about, it would turn, so take that 12-hour print would be about a 20-hour print on high res. And a minimal difference, like to a glance,
difference on two of them.
It's minimal. It is not, doesn't to me justify that print difference. Now, admittedly, this machine isn't designed for doing super high res stuff.
Sure.
But if you were going to get one that is, you're looking at a lot of money. So if I factored all those things in, even with, I think we were like at $250, $300 in shipping, just in shipping, not counting the terrain purchase
for the
price.
Stuff that we were trying
for the
to
stuff
order,
we wanted to get, and we were buying a table full of terrain plus each. But I still, even paying $200 in shipping and the roughly equal cost in, a little bit more in terrain, I still would have been money ahead, and I would not yet have even been painting my 3D printed stuff. You still have to clean up and sand. You don't do full assembly, but you're doing way more cleanup on it than you would a GWK.
And when you talk quality, I mean, what you're really talking about is the striation marks in it.
Right.
Like it has a almost, I don't even know how to explain it, just layered feel to it.
Right. And without doing either some sanding, which I did do on a few pieces and very quickly went, not worth it.
Yeah.
The time investment is substantial. That I've heard people say things like, oh, and I could just print all the terrain I want for free.
Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah.
You're going to be babysitting this thing. Admittedly, well, you go in, you plug it in, you go to sleep, you come home the next day, you take a piece out, back and forth. Any of the really interesting cool kits are printed in sub-assemblies, and then you glue it together.
Sure.
When you factor all those things in, it is not an efficient way to get a table of terrain done.
Right.
Is it a way to do it? Sure. But I mean, for most folks, you are looking at $1,000, give or take, up front, and hours and hours and hours of work to get it to the table.
Yeah.
Now, admittedly, if you have access to a machine like I did, I'm out 30,
Take
40,
advantage of it.
30,
Yeah.
40 bucks and I have downtime. Hey, you know, if you can get somebody to be like, hey, print this for me, I'll buy the materials. It's great. You know, it is a great tool. But I mean, the reality is I'm looking at the new Kill Team terrain going like, oh my God, that's so cool. Why don't I wish I had that stuff.
Right.
It'd take you 20 minutes to drive there and buy it, right?
Yeah.
So-
Well, and I could have it now as opposed to
Time is money, right?
Well, time is time.
Yeah. How much is it worth?
The only
right?
resource not replaceable.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, it is a tool. It is something that's out there. The notion of printing a miniature with it to me is laughable.
Yeah.
And I've even seen the companies that's what they
That they're
specialize
doing
in. Those models are not real good. Not the ones
They're
I've
not,
seen.
They're not up to scale yet.
No,
right?
they're just
I
not
think,
there yet.
You know, 5-10 years from now, we may be
Maybe.
having a different discussion, but it's still a little ways.
Yeah, like I said, the
That's
future
kind of
is
where I'm at
just
too.
Yeah.
the future's just not here yet.
Yeah.
But it's on
and
the way.
It is inevitably, and I don't see GW needing to really plan for that day just yet.
I can hear Jeff's teeth grinding already. Anyway, let's move on to kind of hobby goals and promises. For me, I really got to finish Magnus. Like that's kind of the thing that's been sitting in the back. I got to finish Magnus, and I want to at least get all these bases washed and primed, and then prepared for painting. And I may take you up on a painting point at some point. The other thing kind of holding me back is I did just get promoted at work. So I have even more work to do. So again, time is time.
Yep.
And so I have limited amount of time, especially right now when I'm trying to prove that, yes, I am worthy of this promotion
Right.
you've just handed to me. So, but those things I think I can commit to in the next 2 weeks. What about you, Austin? Or Jody? Let's go Jody next.
Okay. I want to get this terrain.
I saw this.
I want to get the terrain that I mentioned underway and get it to a playable place on the tabletop, and that's easy. It's I've rattle canned it to the point it's at right now to show you guys.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need a ton more because it's frankly not detailed enough to justify a ton more.
Right.
I'm going to start on my Nurgle army so that I can dive into my Plague Hulk. Before I can touch the Plague Hulk, though, I need to do a test unit just to make sure that the Nurgle scheme that's in my head will work in practice. So first thing will be a unit of Plague Bearers, just because that's the rank and file, and if it works on them, it'll work everywhere else.
Right.
And then I'll do the Plague Hulk because I'm excited to have all four of those things done. And then finally, and this is actually should have been in hobby progress, an Ultramarine kill team of Primaris Marines. And
Who are you and what have you done with Jody?
Yeah, if you have listened to the show and heard me on here before, you have heard me say painting Marines is torture and I'll never paint Marines ever again and it's the worst. And then I played Kill Team and I was like, actually Primaris Marines are kind of cool and I already built them and I've already bought them and they're already sitting in my garage waiting
I
to get
want to
airbrushed.
dive a little deeper into this.
No, I'm such a hypocrite and it hurts.
Tell us why you chose the Ultramarines.
Oh, I'm a Boys in Blue. It was my very first army. Got stolen out of my car when I was
It's like 3 Ultramarine players.
sneaking
I gotta
out.
get some more variation in my guesses.
Yeah, I was like sneaking out and faking staying at a friend's house, and I parked my car somewhere, and it got broken into, and the army got stolen.
no.
I have always been a Boys in Blue, and just after painting multiple Marine armies, I've been like, nope, not going back. But Kill Team means that painting a squad of Marines is a whole different story.
Yeah.
So, and I even put all the flair on them, and they got purity seals and pouches and knives, and it's
Looks like a ghillie suit of purity seals.
The idea of just painting 6 to 10 models, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's appealing.
Yeah, and
So-
it was the get me over the hump to go. I've wanted to do this. Cool. So
And we'll talk a little bit about that later.
yeah,
so.
they're done.
Austin, what are you working on?
Like I mentioned earlier, Carl, it's maintaining consistency. I seen a huge success from July, right? And continue with that 1 hour a night goal. Really, some nights I get 2, some nights I get 0, but
That's
it's
exactly right.
it just keep that consistency, and it's showing that I can get things done. And the biggest thing, you just touched on Ultramarines, Jody, is I've been having this kind of midlife crisis with my Ultramarines army. I've just been slightly bored with it, so it's giving me more motivation to go try something new. Okay. So that leads to my other kind of hobby goal for this month is to get the EdMech finally to tabletop standard.
Nice.
Where it just looks painted, base colors washed. And then over time, I can work on like kind of highlighting and things like that, touch-ups. And then I'll take a trip to Age of Sigmar, hopefully in October, just in time for Halloween for my Nighthawk army. I want to spend, I think, September kind of thinking about a color pattern and how I want to build that army. I don't want to just dive right in.
Nice.
So I'm taking some time on that. So yeah.
Nice. All right. So games played. I'll go first. Well, Jody and I kind of go together in some ways. Played some. We played some Kill Team. Obviously, we played some Necromunda.
Yep.
Did I play you in Kill Team? I did not, Austin.
I actually played Anthony.
You played Anthony.
Yeah.
That's right. So I've gotten a lot of Kill Team in the last few weeks. I played Aaron. Let me tell you, Necrons are really interesting in the way they work and the way they're sloughing off wounds and that kind of thing. I played Jason Mullins from the UK was out here for the weekend. He wanted to see how Kill Team played, so we played a couple games. I primarily been focusing on playing my Thousand Suns for the most part and some Grey Knights. So he played Grey Knights. I played went down to Southern California for Southern California Geekin that was kind of thrown down there in a little house, and brought Kill Team and showed some guys how to play Kill Team. So I played John Campos in a couple games there. I played against Eldar. I've played against Harlequins. I've played against Grey Knights. I played with Grey Knights. I'm really enjoying how fast Kill Team is playing. So all of my games played have been Kill Team and Necromunda at this point.
Yeah.
Jody.
Yeah, well, so we played, and then I also played some Kill Team with Brian, who's actually coming over tomorrow morning. Yay, Teacher Summer, for a pretty good bender of Kill Team. He is Yeah. Hey, I'm right there with him. There's a big old pie and it's got crows sticking out of it. He and I are both just bite by bite.
For the record, there were times where we were talking Kill Team, we were talking the size, and a lot of people expressed no interest in games this size. I have zero interest. I don't want to do it.
Yeah, there are two uninterested people playing tomorrow morning. So, and then also moving on from that, wow, there's a lot of hobby.
You could play something else.
We could, but we're not, because it's spoilers. It's good. Also, I went up to Endgame, and they have a twice monthly Shadespire meetup, and met up with the Dawn and some of the guys up there, Eric and. I'm forgetting one of their names. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
All right. Sorry.
It'll come to you later.
Bruce.
There you go.
Bruce.
Boom. See?
There it is.
Told you.
Played a game, super fun, super enjoyable with them. And there's some 3D terrain on Etsy and 3D printed stuff out there. I just wanted to give a really quick shout out and props to somebody regarding this. I know this is a little off topic, so bear with me, folks.
That's all right.
There is Print Terrain and Game Mats. Print terrain, but it shares the T. Print Terrain and Game Mats through Etsy is a fellow here in the very South Bay area, south of me even, who has an Etsy shop, and he was selling Shadespire terrain for just the little hex modular pieces. And I ordered a couple sets. They looked great. Some people online had recommended them. The game's super fun. I've been playing the heck out of it. When they showed up, they were wrong. They didn't match the board. They were the wrong configuration of hexes. And I met one of the guys in Oakland that I was chatting with, had them as well, and he'd cut his to match the board, so they were still playable. They looked a little wonky, but made it work. And it worked fine. And he was saying that he'd messaged the guy online, and the guy had told him that he didn't realize he'd made the mistake, and he'd adjust it and send him one. I didn't think anything of it. I went home. I had plenty of those little terrain pieces. I wasn't going to reach out to the guy. I was happy to help somebody out locally. Today, when I came home from getting a coffee and going for a walk with my wife this morning, there was a package on the front step, and it was replacement parts for my order. I have not contacted the guy.
That's amazing.
Nothing. And I was like,
wow.
Man, talk about awesome customer service.
Customer service.
There's a letter in it that says, due to the great Shadespire community, I realized I made an error, and I wanted to make sure everybody got the right thing.
Cool.
That's awesome.
And just went of his own cost and sent them out to everybody.
That's awesome.
That is rare and awesome, and I was totally blown away.
And he's on Etsy?
Cool.
Yeah, Etsy.
All right, well, I'll include the link to his stuff on the show notes.
Yeah. So that's it for me for games played. Lots of Kill Team, a little
Austin.
bit of Necromunda, a lot of Shadespire.
Well, I've played a total of 3 games, 2 games in which were the larger version of Kill Team, also known as 40K.
40K?
So,
Interesting.
believe it or not.
Tell me more about this game.
I played against my good friend Alex.
Wait, it goes bigger?
Yeah, it actually goes bigger.
Comes in pints.
Played a good friend of mine, Alex, who is also a recent California transplant from Chicago.
Nice.
Board gamer.
That's what all these tanks are for.
Yeah, exactly right. We've been playing games for years.
Yeah.
He's brand new to 40K, so he's building a Death Guard army, and I'm kind of, obviously still new within a year. So it's been me learning as I teach, which is probably the best way to learn. So we've played 2 games in July. Both 50 power level.
Okay.
One has an asterisk on it, which I'll touch on here in a minute. Both times we used open war cards,
Okay.
which is, in my opinion, a really fun way to play.
Yes.
Agreed.
That first game, we did burn and pillage objective with the orbital debris twist.
Yeah, that's
Don't
where
know
the
this.
stuff is
Yeah.
falling from the sky.
yeah,
I haven't
yeah.
done that one yet.
Wound you.
I tell you,
It causes mortal wounds or something, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I rolled so poorly that game. I mean, I wasn't hitting anything. The Ultramarines were just shooting at rocks the entire time.
Kind of average.
But the moment
Marines.
the orbital debris rolled, I rolled 3 6s in a row, and it was just like, okay, well, these satellites that are coming down, or
And at 50
these,
power level.
strategic.
it's just like, well, I picked that character, I picked that character, and that character, and and then I roll that, and I
here's-
don't even take any wounds on that.
And here's
it's like,
the other thing: it doesn't matter if your opponent's in close combat.
Yeah.
according to so I was in hand-to-hand combat with Araman fighting somebody, and that orbital debris came down, and he just was like, "Oh, it hits Araman." Boom! Like it's like the guy's right in front of him in a piece of chunk of metal.
let me put him back in my case now,
Yep.
and that's it.
Yep.
So, at the end of the game, I looked at it. We didn't finish the game just because the night was running pretty late, but he's learning. I built lists around him, kind of learning new units,
Sure.
like with flyers, and brought a couple units with psychic abilities and things like that. But fun game
If he
overall.
needs to borrow anything in terms of armies or forces,
Oh, I think he's pretty close to having a full
Okay.
army at this point, and
Okay.
and he's a pretty good painter too. I mean, he's
Good.
showing us. He sends me pics all the time, and I mean, his stuff looks good. And
Awesome.
I think you'll get a chance to meet him
Is
here in
I
a
was
couple
gonna say,
weeks.
Is he
Yeah.
gonna come over when
Yeah.
Ian comes
Yep.
over? Okay, cool.
Sweet.
The other game I played Alex again, and again open war card. We played in an objective that we're not huge fans on. That's Kill the Courier, which is pretty much you just keep
Yeah. Yeah.
a guy in the back corner and wait for somebody to walk up to you, which is not advantageous for the Death Guard because it takes them half the game to actually get up to you
Yeah.
most of the time. Warp Storm was the twist. I walked into this game telling Alex, hey, I am not liking my Ultramarines army. I am kind of bored with them. They do the same thing. They're nothing special. Well, I came up with this list that I thought was going to be pretty fun, and I kind of beat them off the table. And I felt pretty good. It was like a level of confidence boosting. I went to bed that night like, man, these Ultramarines, they showed up tonight. The next morning, he's like, hey, did you have some Hellblasters in your list? Because the list you sent me didn't have it. Well, sure enough, I was parenting as I was setting up the game board, putting in an extra unit of Hellblasters. And
So,
then it kind of landslides after that.
You had a Tuttle
Yeah.
Tuttle event.
moment there.
Yeah, it wasn't like it was a whole
How'd you
demolisher or
afford
anything.
that extra Vindicator?
Yeah.
Still lost the game.
Oh wow.
But
It's a little different, right?
It
Yeah.
happens. I mean,
So then, that level of confidence
just shot right back.
shot right back down. So I'm like, all right, I gotta get this AdMech army done. So, anyways, and then I
Lose
actually,
with style.
yeah, I'll lose where I can lose with style. At least the models look cool, right? The last game I played was Kill Team versus Anthony.
Couple
It was
games.
a couple games with him. We'll talk about the Kill Team here in a bit. And I got to play with your Thousand Sons rubrics, a couple Zangors, and
Yeah.
a Sorcerer,
Yeah.
and really, really fun. The one takeaway from that is
Damn Harlequin.
that was my note. Damn Harlequins. They are fast, especially when the board is their movement range.
And they're
Yeah.
jumping over terrain. They don't care.
Holy
And-
smokes. Yeah. So
We'll
I
talk
would not.
about a couple of things that I think need to be addressed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
a little tweak
Overall, I
into it.
walked away from that day. Anthony's a great guy.
Super
He's.
nice.
We're both learning the game. Patient. It was a fun time, and that was my first time actually playing Harlequins, 40K or Kill Team. So
Cool.
yeah,
Okay.
very cool.
Yep.
All right, so let's do this. So, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back. So ostensibly, as we said earlier, the show is Necromunda versus Kill Team, and that's kind of
X versus Sever. They're not really versus each other, as we'll kind of talk about, because there has been a lot of discussion online around why does GW need another skirmish game, and are they overdoing it on the skirmish games? And I still don't agree that Blood Bowl's a skirmish game. So anyway, we'll talk a little bit about how these two games are similar, and definitely how they're different, and why they potentially fill different niches and scratch different itches, I think. So we'll be back in just a few minutes, and hang on for these announcements.
Great Scott, 00. Foam Finger's destroying all the models with his rough touch.
Oh, Mullins Penny. Don't you worry. Jond is on the case.
How is that, John?
I'm going to warn the world that they should be using the soft blue foam with the hard cases. Foam Finger will never ruin another model again.
You mean Operation KR? Is the world ready for that, John?
The world is ready. I'll make sure of it. The only way is to spoil Foam Finger's plans.
Hard cases with the soft foam is the only answer. You've convinced me, John. Let's move forward with Operation KR.
The name's Jond. Jimmy Jond.
Oh, John. See? Give 00 John the figures for this mission.
Go to krmulticase.com for some of the best storage and transport solutions for your army. Match almost limitless combinations of cases and trays in the KR transport system to suit your personal requirements. Reasonably priced, KR allows you to transport your minis safely to and from the tabletop, no matter where that battlefield is.
Hard on the outside, soft in the middle. KR Cases is where Jond always gets his foam. KR Hard Cases for soft blue foam.
All right, so welcome back. We are now going to be talking Necromunda for the next half hour, 40 minutes or so. We have had a chance, Jody and I, to play some Necromunda. I'd played some before. In fact, we did a show way back early on, when Jeff was on, and we got Jeff and myself, and I think it was Aaron and Tom, to play some Necromunda. This is back when it was pretty much out of print at that point.
The big yellow book.
Yep. And so Tom introduced me to Necromunda. I had not played before. You want to talk a little bit about Necromunda, where it came from? And
yeah, in the 80s, it got originally released, and I don't have issue numbers or anything like that. I believe the original name of the game was just Confrontation. And listeners, I'm sure you can correct me, and you've got your
they will. Don't worry.
your page numbers down. But it just launched as a kind of one-off game. They had these goofy brat ganger models that they'd put out that had mohawks and glitter and very 80s glam rock awesomeness, and you could play this campaign style game, and it caught on enough that they revisited in the 90s with a full box set that has, I think, what a lot of people identify with as the original Necromunda, of the push fit card and plastic combo terrain.
Yeah, multi-level.
The multi-level stuff, and you came with some Orlocks and some Goliaths, and really kind of grew from there through a couple of supplements. In the, I guess, right around the early 2000s, you got the big yellow book, and it was kind of all things Necromunda crammed into this one big hardback book. And then it just kind of disappeared, like so many specialist games, in that kind of late 90s through the millennium up until, about 4 years ago, 3 years ago, when the lights came back on at the Citadel, as it were. And then we just recently got Necromunda Underhive and a pretty good stack of supplements to go with it.
Yeah. So Necromunda Underhive is the latest version of the game. It comes in a large box, as most GW box games do. It's not cheap. I think it runs $140, $145, somewhere in that area. It comes with 2 gangs. It comes with Escher and Goliath.
Yep.
And comes with everything you need to play, from the rule books to the measuring, the clear measuring piece, which you really like, Jody.
I actually like them. And actually, I will say in Necromunda, it is strangely worthwhile to have that tool because of one of the, as we'll talk about in a little bit, one of the way the rules for the game work. That particular one has a little extra flair on it that helps, weird enough.
Okay.
In addition to that, it comes with a series of 1 foot by 1 foot boards that really represent Zone Mortalis boards from Forge World. Obviously, these are all in 2D, not 3D, but they're painted beautifully, and they have some really neat features that come into play during some of the games. One of the interesting things I think about the way they approached it here now is you don't have the multi-levels yet. Well, you didn't in the base set, but you also set up the boards in different ways. So it's not always just like 2 foot by 2 foot or 3 foot by 3 foot, but you could set them up as a plus sign or,
Could you do it kind of like Shadespire almost, kind of staggered, or is it a little bit
Usually you're
different
playing a mission that dictates out how you set it up. Usually. I mean, you could create your own and set it up any way you wanted, to be perfectly honest.
And kind of a cool thing is there's a box insert within the larger box. There's a smaller box insert that is a loading bay or a servo lift that's out of date. That is your like tutorial mission, and you play. It's graphically rendered with terrain on the inside of it, and so you play your first mission within this box. And it's the inside of a larger building in the Underhive. Kind of to note,
which is a really clever use of the box.
I've noticed it in a couple other things that I'm like, man, I wish they would have carried that over, and I'd love to see them do a little bit more of that. Actually, it's one of very few gripes I have about Kill Team is there was an opportunity to do that I really wish they would have taken. Even so, to that point, Carl, it's called Necromunda Underhive, the current edition that's out, because it is playing within the Underhive, the lowest belly of the greater hive spire, as it were. You're down in the guts, so you're in these tunnels, like you said, the
ruins. Oh, the hive. It's the Underhive of the city itself.
Right, what's it called though from Forge World?
Oh, the Zone Mortalis.
Yeah, it looks like Zone Mortalis, but it's the Underhive. It's the guts, which way back in the day of the 90s was like this coveted way to play that was super hard to render because you'd have to build all these walls. And like in a funny turn, like the box set game, which has met various, some negative reviews, is actually replicating the version of style that back in the 90s, like everybody desperately wanted to play, but was super hard to pull off because of how much you needed to do to make it work.
So I lied. Necromunda Underhive sells for $125 box set. So not $140. Zone Mortalis, I mean, that style originally came from Imperial Armor Bad Ab War 9 and 10, where Alan Bly and those guys had written about it and they just said at the time, fill the board with as much terrain as you possibly can. It's all about line of sight blocking. Jeff and I had played it and really enjoyed it, and then that kind of got expanded on as later Imperial Armor books came out, and then the actual tiles from Forge World came out. So those tiles could be used to play Necromunda quite easily. It'd be beautiful. You can even... so then what happens is after the initial set, Gang War 2, which is a supplement, next supplement comes out featuring a new gang, featuring also rules for 3-dimensional play.
Right, the classic.
Right. And then, that was Gang War. Then Gang War 2 comes out, Gang War 3, Gang War 4, which, let's talk a little bit about the way this is rolling out.
Yeah.
So it's kind of prohibitive in a way.
Yeah.
I think one of the problems we have with Necromunda is in order to play it, you must buy the box set at $125 or have a friend who has the box set at $125 because you can only get the rulebook that way.
Right.
There's no separate way to buy the core rulebook. You can then buy each of the Gang War supplements, which run, I don't know, $30, I think, a pop.
I believe so.
So every time one comes out, there's new missions and that kind of thing, but also you're keeping up with it that way, which, I mean, it's fine. I don't mind that they're expanding it that way. That's great. But it does get pricey quickly.
Right. And I will say of Necromunda as a rules set that issue of only being able to get the rule book in the large starter box set is problematic because it is not a rules set where you could hand off to a friend a copy of the basic rules,
right,
and then be like, here, just play with this and this will get you by. I mean, ostensibly 40K itself, the grand game, could be done that way. You could hand off one of the
like the flip card type things,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
In Necromunda, there's no.
I don't remember what they call that. Like
like the reference sheet.
They called it
or-
like the Imperial Primer or something
like
that they had
Right.
on counters, and it was
Right.
like I still keep one in my KR backpack
Yep.
all the time. Is like, oh,
Sure.
I need a quick rules reference because it's 12 or 20 pages. Like,
Yeah.
it's great. This no way, because it is a very detailed rule set.
Yeah.
It is a callback in a lot of ways, and the vast majority of it. If you played that 90s era version of it or the big yellow book, you will find this very, very familiar. You will know these rules to some degree going in, but even still, you really have to have that rule book available to you. You're going to be struggling without it. Do you want to go through the rule book a little bit?
Well, I just wanted to talk briefly about the quality of it, because the quality of it is solid. The quality of the box set is solid. But if you're looking at this and saying, wow, I could just buy an Escher Gang for $40 online, I could get the cards for it and the rules, and I'm good to go. Well, yeah, but in order to get the rules, and I think somebody brought up to me, I don't remember if it was Aaron or whoever, said, what if I lose my rule book? If I lose my rule book because I left it at the game store while we were playing or something along those lines, now I'm out $125 for a rule book.
Yeah, you can't find it on iTunes, digital copy.
And-
I mean,
and I-
it's
yeah,
it's a
and-
huge stigma, I think, for
And I might
me.
add, it's a 105-page rule book, soft bound,
Right.
beautiful interior art, beautiful.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know,
It's
printing
as
quality,
good as it's ever looked.
but it's not a $125 book.
Right,
No,
right.
But it is. you
Right.
know?
Because you can practically get, and correct me if I'm wrong, pretty much everything else in that box. The 2 gangs you can buy separately,
Yep.
the cards.
Yep.
The dice.
You said you can pretty much create your own boards as you want. It's the rule book,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and you got to pay to play.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's interesting that they haven't released the rule book separately.
Right.
I'm not sure why they haven't, but I do see that as a hindrance.
And I have a theory on that I think I'll wait until at the end when we're doing some comparison to touch on. I think Necromunda might be something that is an indicator species, so to speak, or a little bit of, if you look at it, you want to see a direction of the future. I think Necromunda might be a good indicator. I think we have some clues that the way Necromunda was rolled out, you may see more of this in the future.
Oh, you think?
I do, and I'll talk about that more when we do some comparison. And why I think
may
that.
very well see stuff like Titanicus do the same thing.
And Blood Bowl is not too far off itself.
Yeah, that is true.
So
that is true.
So, well, like I said, I have some thoughts, but those are more appropriate for later.
Yeah. So if you want to keep up with the game, I other than the first supplement, it really is dependent upon what gang you want to play.
Yeah.
I think I mean, you could get away without getting the other gang war supplements, but I think the first one is one that it adds more value to the game in terms of the 3-dimensional aspects of it and how all that works.
Well, not only that, it also has the rules for campaign play.
I was going to
for
say, I thought it builds on the
right.
campaign a bit more,
It does.
right?
It does. So let's step back from campaign because I want to talk about that kind of last because I think that's a real big selling point.
Yeah, I do.
But let's talk about the rules themselves in terms of level of complexity. And let's compare them for the sake of everybody ostensibly listening to this knows what 8th edition 40K plays like.
Sure, absolutely.
So let's talk in comparison to that.
Yeah.
I would say the rules are more fiddly. They're more precise. You have facings to worry about. You have many actions you can take when you're not taking an action, right?
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of setup and positioning plays a super important part.
Absolutely.
It feels like it's way more crunchy
Yeah.
than 8th edition 40K. 8th edition 40K is more abstract.
Yeah.
In its rules. This is, you just have a few models on the table, so it's very precise about what each of those models is doing.
Right. And they've done a good job. Some of those rules of that bygone era of the 90s and even the early 80s, where there is a level of detail where we want to account for, this, not just a gun and how does that gun work, but what happens if I load it with different ammo?
Sure.
What happens if I
Exactly.
load
Yeah.
that gun with different ammo?
It's just another layer of complexity.
Right.
And then who is that person behind that gun too? Like,
Right.
what is their stat line and how is that altering? It's not just a rubric Marine, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
Billy Bob from this game, right?
Yeah.
Billy Bob,
it's
exactly.
Billy Bob Warlock,
handling a
right.
shotgun that has, explosive
Oh, I
incendiary
have
rounds
solid
and things
slugs
like that.
in my
Yeah.
shotgun.
Right,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
this,
yeah.
those are literal sentences that you will be stating while you play, which in and of itself is kind of cool. That it's like, all right, Billy Bob's coming around the corner and he's going to unload with his solid slug shotgun.
Right.
That's cool. Like,
Agreed.
But
you have to buy into it.
Right. And the next guy who comes around the corner isn't Billy Bob Orlock. It's Joe Bob Orlock, his brother. And
he's totally equipped differently.
Yeah. And he's got a combat knife and his trusty las pistol. And it is actually a more reliable weapon than Billy Bob's solid slug shotgun. And like these things all actually happen. And it's that level of detail that I think if this appeals to you, this is where you want to be. I mean, like if you like that kind of detail, but that is very much a callback and a representation of those 90s kind of rules writing. And they've done a great job of streamlining some things. That the measuring ruler floppy thing has a line down the middle in it that is 1 inch wide. The ruler is 1 inch wide, and there's a line down the middle. So when you trace line of sight, you literally can attach that line, but then there's such a thing as a stray shot clipping somebody. Well, then either side of that line is how far out that shot can clip.
Could potentially clip. Yeah.
Well, back in the Wayback Machine, when I was playing this in the 90s, you had to like draw the line and then awkwardly measure an inch off of that line to see if the guy was in. Well, that tool actually helps.
Yeah.
They give you firing arc templates in the rule book, so you can keep track of which way is the person looking when they fire or not, because getting around behind somebody is cool. You want to stab them in the back. In 40K, there is no stabbing somebody in the back.
I think that level of complexity is really, really appealing.
For some
when
folks,
it's only like 10 models.
yes,
right?
and it's doable. When
It's
10
doable
models.
at that level.
Yes, it would not scale up to a larger scale game.
Holy
And
smokes.
that's the interesting point. I think they take very heavy advantage of the scale of the game to increase the layers and complexity of rules. But it does require some practice, and it does require understanding. Like if you play against an experienced player, they're going to trounce you. Like,
Oh, yeah,
they should.
yeah.
You haven't figured out how your gang works, and every gang works very differently. So yeah, I think the layer and complexity of rules is there, but at this scale, it works well. Beyond this, it would start to fall over itself.
Which
Your games would take hours.
If you played second edition 40K, then you are painfully aware of what this looks like extrapolated to a large scale. And I for the grognards out there who love their second ed, hey, keep playing, keep slogging through those rules.
Keep Obe alive.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, literally, it was hours and hours and hours and hours, and just to work, half an hour to work through a close combat. I mean, that kind of stuff.
You want to work, so just briefly talk about in general terms, kind of the phases of the game. Just real quick.
Yeah, there's, funny enough, for all of this complexity, there's only 3 phases to the game.
A lot takes place in some of those phases.
Right. You have the priority phase, which is literally we each roll a d6. Whoever rolls higher has priority to activate the first fighter.
Right.
If there's a tie, you switch priority. Then there's the action phase, in which a great deal happens. Almost everything happens.
Right.
And then there's the end phase, where you see if your gang gives it up and runs away, they're outnumbered, there's too many hurt people. Sometimes if lingering effects kick in, toxins take you out, or all kinds of different things can come into play here. It's the end of phase check for whatnots.
And it should be said that when you're playing, this is all alternating models. So it's not I go with my whole force, then you go. It's all I pick my most important. And some of the best strategy comes from, well, I'm probably going to lose this guy next round because he's about to get charged. Maybe I should do something with him before I lose him. Okay, wait, no, I'm going to use this guy instead. A lot of the strategy and all that comes from the timing of what guy activates before the other guy.
Sure. So if we jump into
I kind
that,
of like that for a moment, just to, it kind of plays like chess a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Or even, as we talk about Kill Team a little bit, I think that's a built-in strategy.
Oh, yeah,
right?
it is.
This dude's about to bleed out, so I better do one last attack or fire.
Yeah, or whatever.
Or crawl away.
Or crawl away, right? Yeah.
And I think that adds, when we're talking about small games with small numbers of models, you want those cinematic moments. You want that heroic charge around the corner, and if I can knock this person down, that'll save Billy Bob Orlock from getting taken out, and those, you want those moments. And so that middle phase, that action phase, as Carl said, you're switching between activations, and And something that did get cleaned up from the old game, at least I felt like was much cleaner, was this notion of you have a fighter. That fighter, depending on their status, so you can already hear these layers of things coming in. Depending on their status, are they down? Are they pinned? Are they hiding for cover? Are they injured? Are they ready and just ready to fight? Gets basically 2 actions. And there are some actions that are long actions that take the whole turn. There are some actions that you can repeat multiple times. So if I want to move, that's a single action. And then I want to move again, that's a second action.
Right.
So I move 2 times. But if I want to charge, that's a full action, but it also has built into it a attack at the end. So I've used my 2 actions effectively to make this 2d6 charge and then roll my attacks out, which happens slightly different than 40K. It's not just a matter of just a hit number. There's a bunch of variables that come in there of again, the status of who are you hitting. But that mechanic is relatively tidy of this actor or this ganger or champion is activating and they're going to do 2 things.
Right.
And then, okay, you go, you do 2 things. And I go, and then once everybody's done, all the fighters have done 2 things, we do an end phase, roll for priority, go again.
Right. And how long is that one typical round, would you say? Is that
varies
30,
tremendously.
60 minutes?
It could be a single round. I'd say 30 minutes would probably be as long
I
as
think
it
that's
takes.
pretty legit.
But then if you go a 4-turn game, that's a 2-hour game.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
10
yeah.
dudes.
And this
It
is
adds up quickly, right?
This is the interesting
Yeah.
point. I mean, the layers of complexity slow the game down.
Sure.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing. People who play this game want that complexity.
Yep.
I think there's a place for it. I certainly enjoy it sometimes, but maybe not every time, right? So, and I think we jumped ahead of one point that I wanted to talk about in terms of the lore, Jody, which is where is this all taking place? Because I didn't mean to jump ahead of your notes there, but let's kind of set the tone here a little bit.
Okay. So what Necromunda is a planet much like any planet in the vast Imperium.
It could be any planet.
It
really.
could be any planet. It just happens to be this one. It was settled by the Imperial, or reclaimed by the Imperial Fists. They still have a bastion on planet. It is largely wiped out, except for being an incredibly valuable industrial resource planet. And these giant hive cities, these spires, have grown up all over the planet.
Yep.
And
as Imperial planets have.
And this one has no external resources. There's no vegetation or anything. It is ash wastes effectively in between these hive cities. Think Judge Dredd.
I think they were thinking Judge Dredd too.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
And our ostensibly our story is largely set in the largest of these hives called Hive Primus, which is overseen by Lord Helmwar. Now, to a distant Imperial eye, you're some administrator back on Terra or some Marine. All you care about is Lord Helmwar's planet. This game goes, Lord Helmwar is some distant super noble that you will never see, and maybe you hear his name a few times. He is irrelevant to you. You are so far beneath him. There is a feudal system below him of these great houses, and then each of those great houses oversees a clan. The clans, much like unions almost, are in this very feudal system of the king being Lord Helmwar down through these noble houses down into the clans. The clans control the planet's resources. And the clans are the names you've all heard. If you've heard anything about Necromunda, you've heard us mention Escher and Orlok and Goliath. And then you've got Cawdor, Delok, or Delkay, as I hear people say it, or other ways.
I've just heard it as Delac.
Yeah,
Whatever.
that one.
And Van Sar.
And Van Sar. And each one of those has a specific area of specialization within Hive Primus. But then other hives, if you wanted to take the narrative this way, and this is where the game really is rich, if you wanted to take the game this direction, there's other hives, and certain hives are controlled more or less by other clans. So there is a spire somewhere out there, or a hive somewhere out there, where Escher is largely the dominant force.
Right.
Now, it's interesting, it calls out in the history of this that Lord Helmwar enforces an equity of control amongst the clans in Hive Primus. So there is to keep competition, to keep people fighting over the scraps, as it were, he forces that everybody has equal footing in the lower parts of his hive city.
Right.
And that's what you're fighting it out for, is you pick your house and what they're about, and then they, whether they're religious fanatics or whatever it may be, and then you become a gang as part of that clan house.
Right.
And you etch out your turf, and you literally will have turf, and you fight it out to protect and gather those resources that are valuable to your gang.
Right. So gangs are built, where 40K is built on points, gangs are built on credits.
Yep.
You have money that you're spending to initially purchase the members of your gang, and there's different hierarchies of gang members, as you just said. There's like the gang leader, there's gangers, there's champions, there's juves, which are like your lowest level. The juve is like
they're the new initiate.
They're juveniles who have literally joined the gang for the first time.
The noobs.
And so you will build your force and then go play against your opponent. Now, that sounds great and all, and that's fun if I'm just, hey, let's make a gang and fight each other, and you may enjoy a couple hours, but it's not going to carry you for a real long time. Where this excels,
We'll pause just a sec.
is now I'm going to pause it.
Okay. So when you build your gang, and this is the first step of like really kind of getting it, and you and I had this moment of like, okay, let's just play real quick and get down, and okay, let's throw our gangs together. You don't just throw a gang together.
No.
You have 1,000 credits, and unlike 40K now, we go back to old school 40K, you will buy every piece of war gear for every fighter in your gang, and there is no standard template.
No.
Now, certain gangs have access to certain weapons versus others because whatever it is they specialize in.
Correct. For example, the Van Sar folks get access to way more technology than the Goliath guys, who are really kind of like, as you described it, the kind of muscle behind the what were you comparing the gangs to before?
Unions.
They're like the muscle behind the unions, and they're bred for strength.
Yeah, they're literally
huge
genetically
guys.
bred to be these full on meathead.
But
bros.
they don't have access to all the technology that other groups.
They have rivet guns and hammers.
Right.
Whereas the Escher specializes in toxins, so they have poison weapons all over the place. Yeah, that sort of thing. So that notion of when you build your gang, you are going to build every single person exactly as you want them, and from a hobby hero standpoint, a modeling fan standpoint, this is maybe the coolest part of the game is I get to sit down and the infamous Goliath cigar may actually be a piece of war gear I want to buy for this guy. I mean, it gets down to, does that dude have a grenade on his hip or not?
Right.
Build that storyline, right?
Yeah. And building that narrative, it was interesting. I hadn't played Necromunda in years, and I dug out my old
came back to you
Escher
quick,
gang
though, when we were playing.
And I was like, oh, right, this is Storm, and this is Typhoon, and this is, and they're
Wait, are those American Gladiators that I'm hearing?
No, X-Men. It's a bunch of
sorry.
female-styled X-Men, and then
I should have known that.
And I was like, all right, okay, and this is so-and-so, and she's the leader of the, and I remembered my gang name was the Crimson Clique.
Yeah.
So it's these red Escher gangers from the 90s called the Crimson Clique.
And that's a piece of this game that I love, is like the tongue-in-cheek aspect of it too, is like you can have fun with it, where from a 40K standpoint, like I want it to be a little sad and dark and depressing, right? With Necromunda, I kind of feel like, hey, go have fun.
Well,
like
it is dark.
Yeah, it is. Oh, totally. I mean, you can't escape that.
But here's where it kind of comes into like your red click or crimson click. For example, Tom and I have played multiple times the Games Workshop Wild West game, right? And Tom has a gang of guys that are all based on alcohol names. So he's like, oh, this is Jack Daniels, and this is, you know, and like he's got like all these guys based around that. And it's just fun, even though the game is actually really, really cool. Right. You know, it does have that level of silliness you can add to it.
Right. And in a weird way, Necromunda almost begs for it, because the story itself is, it is the darkness and the grimness and the sadness of the 40K universe in a game setting. It is the worst case scenario. You literally, your fighter's existence matters zero.
Yeah.
And they're aware of it.
Yeah.
They know that they don't mean anything. In fact, if you look through
you're
the
fighting
rulebook,
for just resources, right? And like political power, or
no, not
clan
political power.
No,
Not at
no,
all.
you are just trying to stay alive.
Just trying to stay alive.
Think of
well,
real
that's
life.
depressing, Jody.
Real life. No, real life. Like, why do gangs exist in real life? Here it's been codified into a system of existence.
Yeah.
Like everybody is part of gang life. And there's a great picture in the rulebook of this Escher ganger, and I rolled a 1 on my plasma gun, torched up. And she has some funny name about like Good Luck Betty. But she's this Escher Ganger holding a plasma gun, and she has burn scars up and down half her body. And it's this in a weird way, the dark, like the air quotes comedy of like the funny names is almost like, no, like they need this, like there has to be that piece. But again, just another thing is the rulebook has over 30 pages of background in the beginning, which we'll do a comparison on in a little bit. And it's because that world's so rich. And I think the people who love this game and have a real strong attachment to it, it's a great classic sci-fi setting.
And we kind of touched on this a little bit ago, not on the show, but talking through your notes, was being an outsider to this game. I didn't know the backstory because it's hard to get that from this rule book, right? Unless you buy the entire game. And, you know, I just look at some of these gangs and I say, well, the Escher gang's pretty cool, but I don't know if I'd lean towards that. And then I see your show notes, you know, they're pharmaceutical. That's the resource in which they kind of control. And they're all women due to this exposure. I kind of think of like a comic book, Why the Last Man situation that occurred.
Right.
And they're shooting poison darts everywhere. I'm like, okay, that sounds pretty cool. But like, I mean, that's the richness of the background story. And it's now, but it's, there's a layer for me to get to that point. Yeah. Getting to the rule book that I kind of want to get to, but it's a little difficult. So.
It is. And the rules are gonna keep you fighting through that the whole time. Yeah. So.
Yep. Am I okay to go ahead now?
Yes, please.
No, it's okay. Everything in its time, right?
Yeah.
So, so I think where this game really excels, as we've been kind of alluding to, is its campaign system. And Jody, you quantified this really, really well back when we were playing it, and we'll talk about the elephant in the room in the next segment, but. Where this game excels is the campaign's narrative is built into it, and as the campaign progresses, the results of missions you play have an impact on your gang, have an impact on each of your individual guys. You have a gang roster that you're actually pulling from. So you, unlike 40K, in 40K I build an army, and that's the army I bring to the table and I play. Here you're building your gang, but you're picking certain people from the gang for each particular mission that you want to go on, and some people are not involved in that fight.
Right.
And those people gain experience or tragically die or, you know,
lose the limbs here and there.
Or get captured.
And then have to get, you know, hopefully recovered. Or there can be a meta game where I'm saying, okay, well, I'll give you 200 credits for this guy back if you give me this guy back.
So like ransoming, right?
Yeah, it really is literally ransoming. And that's kind of, I like that there's like a meta game to it. Yeah. Blood Bowl has kind of the similar
Absolutely
thing.
Does, yeah.
And
very similar.
Where this game, in my opinion, really, really excels is that it has a rich and deep campaign system when you buy the expansion that takes it to a level of, well, a one-off game is fun, but if you can dedicate the time and energy to run a campaign for this, then you're going to really start to begin to track your guys and how they do against your opponents, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, and you will be rewarded with stories of heroic diving charges off of the third story of a building to take out your Juve with their wrench, you know, taking out your opponent's leader who is feared by all. And like, these are stories that won't just be like, wouldn't it be cool if, but like, no, that actually happened. That was an actual moment of gameplay.
Right.
It reminds me of D&D, right? Those moments of...
That's kind of where its fundamentals come from, like a role-playing game,
right? I mean, and to me, I think part of that is like you need that group of individuals where you can say, hey, we're spending this weekend or we're spending this day playing a campaign. Yeah. You can't just go up, hey, Thursday night, let's play some 40K. You need to have that investment long-term to really get a payout, I think, in the end.
And so to that end, after our day of gaming, both this and Kill Team, we were discussing, well, you know, this would be fun to run a campaign. Yeah, but do I really want to spend... You know, I'm not going to go every Thursday to play a game or whatnot. Well, what if we were to run a weekend event or just, you know, one day, play as many games as you can? I feel like that is not going to work the best with Necromunda. I feel like you're going to get a couple, 3, maybe 4 games in if you're pushing it. And that's... While your gang will start to evolve and things will happen, you're not going to see the real big payoff. I think the real big payoff comes after 8, 10, 16 games, where you're starting to see things evolve and clear leaders present themselves and various gang members get injured, wounded, taken out of action, increase in abilities, that kind of thing. So I don't think it's a quick hit.
Right.
I think if we had 2.5 hours to play a game, we would look at it and say, well, do we want to play 40K or do you want to get a game of Necromunda in? Or,
right.
It's an equivalent, I feel, an equivalent investment in your time.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think, as with anything, experience will vary your time. Experienced players will drastically cut that time down.
Sure.
Initially, absolutely. You are looking at that first game session, much like, I think the D&D examples or role-playing examples are a great parallel in that first night, any of you have role-played, and we all have, that first night, you go in knowing we're not really going to do a lot. Even if we show up with characters ready to go, typically we're not going to get a whole lot done if we're planning on playing this long term.
Right.
And that first night of Necromunda is probably going to be that way. You might get a game in, and then as the weeks goes on, it'll pick up. But you're going to want to see that. I think you're absolutely right. You're going to want to see a dozen games. So the scars that last forever are on your gangers. And,
sure.
And Gwen's got time to grow from a Juve to a ganger and lose an eye and get a combat knife.
Right. I think bottom line for me, the game is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
After playing with you, Jody, I assembled my Goliath guys. I was like, I definitely want to play this again. I'm not sure when I'm going to play this again. I would love to be involved in a campaign playing it. Mm-hmm. When am I going to find the time to do? I mean, there's so many things competing for my time right now that it became, okay, I had a painter paint some other stuff for another game for a role-playing session that I'm going to be doing. And I immediately had contacted him the next night, and I was like, so I've got these Necromunda gangs I may want you to just paint up for me real quick because I just don't have the time to do it. And he's like, okay, just let me know. And I said, okay. And I was really committed to doing it. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like,
yeah,
maybe I'll have them do one. So I have one if we play, but I don't know that I'm like, I don't see me playing this in the next month, 2 months, unless somebody really buckles down and says, I'm going to launch a Necromunda campaign. I'm all in, I'll play, but I can't run one.
Right.
So
arbiter steps forward, as it were.
Right. So any other points you want to add about Necromunda we may have missed?
No, I mean, I think we hit the highlights. And that's the big one is, and there's a little bit more I'll say about this kind of towards the end, but that if this sounds cool to you like that detail. If you're an Infinity player that misses the Grimdark, this is the game.
Yeah.
The game Infinity kind of operates not too dissimilar from this. You're still rolling D6s here. You've got custom dice and all those kind of things as well. And as settings go, I don't know that I've seen anything that
it is unique.
Yeah, that simulates this kind of Judge Dredd, dark Blade Runner Undercity thing and gets that feeling across in a board game or tabletop game setting. It captures it beautifully.
I think if you have the terrain from the original Shadow Wars Armageddon, using that would work fantastic with Necromunda. I think, like many of these games, you're going to want a lot of terrain.
Yeah.
And in particular, when you start talking 3D with Necromunda, you want a lot of terrain and ramps and walkways between those pieces of terrain. I have seen people do just amazing boards for Necromunda. And I think part of the great aspect of, as we'll talk about later, both of these as skirmish games is that you can spend more time making this guy unique, or I'm going to give him a scar, and that's the scar he got with such and such. Or, you can take the time to give your band a bunch of personality. You're going to name all these guys, so you take the time to think about that, and you can really double down on the hobby.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Then we'll start talking about GW's newest release, Kill Team, and how that has evolved and what it has become. All right, we are back, and now we're talking about GW's latest offering, Kill Team, which we've played quite a bit of now. And I mean, look, spoiler alert, I really enjoy Kill Team.
Yeah,
like,
it's not too bad.
I think it's a fast way to play. I think it's great. Narrative overview. When, it's very short. It's very small. It really discusses kind of what kill teams are, how they're small bands trying to fight for various objectives in a larger theater of war.
Right.
And that's pretty much it.
Yep.
It's very generic, so you can shape it yourself.
Yes.
Which I think is the intention. It can be used in any theater of war. You decide what the storyline is because it involves so many different types of forces. So let's talk about those types of forces real quick. I think that's probably one of the best places to start. Pretty much everything you can play in 40K, you can play in Kill Team, sans demons. There's no demons. Sisters of Battle are not there or represented yet. Nor are really Inquisition specifically, I don't believe.
Yeah, no assassins or anything like that.
So what you're really looking at is playing between, I want to say 5 and 12 models, 4 and 12 models.
3 and 20.
Is it 3 and
Yeah, I
20?
think
3
it
and
was
20.
like a 3 and 20.
I don't know how you get
It starts in the match play you choose between. I want to say you can have between 4 and 12 in match play to begin. So okay, but you're talking small groups, and the only ones that are going to hit that 20 unit or 20 model limit are probably Tyranids, Orcs,
Guard.
potentially Guard.
You took 20 naked guardsmen.
Yeah. I mean, they would not be a successful guardsman group. Beyond that, what you're really looking at is, in my experience, it's been between 5 and 10 models on a board at any given time. For me, lately, I've been playing primarily Thousand Suns, which that's the other thing I should say is your force has to be all drawn from the same faction keyword. So there's no mixing of, I'm going to take Thousand Suns, but mix in a Chaos Space Marine, or they are Thousand Suns or not. However, you have a limited selection of models you can choose from the codex.
Right. And that's, I think, one of the issues. There's been a lot of discussion of that online, that for the
mostly about what isn't represented.
Right, what isn't represented. And mostly you see what's thematically would make sense, or GW has worked into, if you look at the individual narrative page for that faction, why it is that those are the units you get. Why orcs are, there's suddenly a whole lot of mech boys around. Well, within their narrative page, it explains why. And mechanically, it makes sense. You wouldn't see a warlord. So who is running the show here? Who would be a character that would lead a little hit squad in to do something like that? And for the most part, you see units that make sense there. I think the only one that's a little strange, there's a couple here and there that are
there's a couple
strange,
in there. Like, it's interesting to me that the Eldar get no Psyker. I thought that was kind of a miss.
Or striking scorpions.
Yeah.
Since that's...
Do you see like a huge disparity between certain factions as far as like options in which you can take?
For sure. Yeah. So, for example, Grey Knights, you get a Grey Knight.
And that's pretty much it. Yeah,
which includes a Justicar or a heavy weapons Grey Knight. Right?
Sure.
But that's really it. Like, it's just the Grey Knight. You
well,
don't
like
get
the Thousand
Terminators.
Suns might have 3.
Thousand Suns
4.
get access to Rubric Marines, Aspiring Sorcerers, and Zangors.
But you could build that army. Basically, it's like getting, say, 100 points. You could take all Rubric. You could take a couple Zangors.
Yes.
So
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the rules.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, do you think I covered kind of the gist of it? Here's right away. Here's, I think, one of the benefits of the game. To play this game, I saw on our group a couple people saying, "Well, I'm not going to invest heavily in this game." What does invest heavily mean in this game? Look, the chances are you already own enough models to play this game, and in multiple variations.
Right.
Investing, quote unquote, heavily means buying the rule book, which is $40.
Right.
And by the way, it's a fairly thick rule book that covers every force that's allowed in the game and all the rules.
And campaign play.
if you are a player of 8th edition 40K, grabbing these rules and understanding them is going to be much easier.
Yeah.
There are some significant changes, but for the most part, it's 8th edition with some twists.
It's pretty quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you know how to play 8th,
Yeah,
you'll get it.
Like by the second,
couple snags, and
by
then
the
they're-
second
Yep.
game I play, I was pretty solid on
Yep.
it. And I've made a few mistakes here and there, of course.
I mean, the time difference in our first game to our second game, I think it was
Was
an
drastic,
hour
right.
and a half down to like
30
maybe
minutes.
sub 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it was insane.
And
Yeah.
it can even be shorter than that because, I mean, some, obviously we'll probably talk about this, but certain campaign objectives or game objectives can end very quickly.
Yeah.
for sure, the
So,
missions are very
yeah.
important to pay attention to the missions.
Yeah, they are.
Okay. Phases. You want to take that, Jody?
Yeah, so we've got initiative. You're going to roll to start the turn. Okay. See, when I put this down, I even went, I'm not going to talk about it. No, I'm going to talk about it. Before you play, there's this really cool little wrinkle called the scout phase. I don't know if it's called it's not even a
Yeah,
phase. It's the scouting mode
Yeah.
or whatever. And you each pick a D6 secretly and then reveal it. And it's secret team maneuvers or countermeasures of setting up booby traps or disarming the booby traps, scouting terrain or advancing your fighters or setting up Overwatch snipers. And
Right.
And it's this really interesting little cat and mouse. And
It's also rock, paper, scissors
Right.
type situation.
And it can have, as we saw, a pretty drastic effect on the outcome of the game. If somebody's like, "Oh, I'm going to advance forward," and the other person's like, "Well, I'm waiting for you to do that." Oh,
Right.
my dudes all get gunned down.
Right.
This is going to be rough.
Or, hey, I'm going to plant booby traps. Well, my
Right.
guys cleanse the room with booby traps.
Right.
So
Okay,
those
so
are worthless.
Nothing
Yeah.
happens and we move on. Yeah, it can be very interesting. My game with Brian, I put out booby traps. He ran over them the whole game and they did nothing, but they were there the whole time. So
Something to think
interesting
about.
enough. But ostensibly the actual let's play a game and we're moving models after that scouting shenanigans situation. We go initiative, we roll 2d6, and then if there's a tie, just like in Necromunda we talked about, you'll alternate. Now the person who wins is activating first or is
Right.
moving first.
Throughout that whole turn.
Throughout that whole turn. And then you also in this phase, you gain your command points, which we'll talk about are pretty important to this game. So you'll gain your command points. In most cases, you're gaining 2. Then you move into the movement phase, which is very 40K like. I move all my guys. You go, you move all your guys. The only real twist here, there are 2 little wrinkles. If a fighter doesn't move, he can ready himself to fire. He can be taking aim or lining up his shot. Or if there is a charge during this phase, which is just roll 2d6, it's not move and then charge. It's just roll
Right.
2d6 and charge in.
So charging happens in the movement phase.
In the movement phase, right.
Mm-hmm.
And you can react with Overwatch just like you normally would, or you can retreat and move 3 inches away, making that charge more difficult to complete. However,
impossible.
Or impossible to, yeah, I've had that happen in my last game. And once you do that, though, of course, I mean, it to me makes sense with the other 40K rolls. You're giving up your chance to shoot, but potentially leaving that model high and dry.
Note that you can only do that if you haven't moved.
Right. And if you fail a charge, you can still move forward the failed distance towards the model you declared your charge or models you declared your charge at, which is kind of an interesting little wrinkle to the game that isn't a 40K thing. So if they're 6 inches
I
away.
have done that wrong.
Yeah, if they're 6
gonna
inches
say,
away.
I did that wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if there's
right there with you.
6 inches and you roll the 3, that
You move
guy
3.
can move 3 inches towards that target. Yeah. He gives up.
God.
Now he did advance, and he's not going to be shooting or doing any of those other
Right,
things.
sure.
But he doesn't just stand there digging for gold in his nose, having an orky moment. So then things get
I
different.
missed a line in the rule book.
It's a little important.
and you know what? This is because I probably assumed.
and there's
And you have to be careful.
You come
that.
in already knowing a
I
certain
know
rule
that.
set, and I'll skip over that. I get that, right?
and I think that's a great heads up, folks who are regular 40K players.
Yeah.
There are a lot of little
Yeah,
twists
sure.
and tweaks and turns that I really enjoy that they put in here that makes Kill Team its own game. I think the initial talk online of, Kill Team, it's just simplified 40K, which is not something I was interested in. It is not. It is 40K
It's
with
a different game.
It is a different game. It is 40K, but with a really aggressive twist.
I'm gonna take a detour here.
Oh, yeah.
And talk about something to the point you just made about Kill Team is not just 40K light, though it has a lot of the feeling of 40K.
It can be, I think.
And this
but
speaks to this whole should Horus Heresy go 8th edition, and there's been this discussion going on I've seen from time to time about how people said before Alan passed away, oh, Horus Heresy was going to go 8th edition, or they were going to do it, or they weren't going to do it, or whatever the case may be. The reality is, nobody really knows for sure where things sit at this point. But one thing I do know for sure is, because I've been in discussion with some of Alan's friends, and it was just an interesting point that was made that, yeah, it probably would have moved, but whatever it moved to wouldn't have been 8th edition. Right. Just like Horus Heresy is not really 7th edition, right? And so whatever it became wouldn't have been, it's not a direct port, and you got to always think about it. And much like that, Kill Team is not really 8th edition.
No, it's weird.
But it is, but it isn't.
Right, because it looks like 8th, and it kind of smells like 8th.
But it doesn't taste like it.
Sure doesn't taste like 8th. Tastes real different.
Okay, sorry to go on a tangent.
I think that was a great
it's
point.
It's an interesting point.
Especially as we're about to head into the psychic phase,
right?
Which is the first time you go, wait, what? So if you have initiative, your psyker does a psychic power, just like they do, and roll 2d6, compare, don't roll 2 1s, don't roll 2 6, whatever it is.
Deny the witch.
And then your opponent gets to do a psychic power. Just one. And you only get to do one.
Yep.
And that's it. And
you can't spam.
And by the way, at this point, it says in the rules, choose your psychic power. Yeah, that's one psychic power right now.
Right.
That's the equivalent of smite, which is actually referred to as something else. But
mind bullets, isn't it?
That's the
missiles.
That's Carl Tuttle trademark mind bullets.
Sure, that is not. I did not.
It's
come up
something
with
different
that.
though than smite. Yeah,
but it's effectively smite, and you but it's like smite light. Like you basically either cause 1 mortal wound or a D3 mortal wounds if you roll an 11.
Right.
And that's it. You only get that one shot. So it's pretty quick, but those mortal wounds are lethal.
Yeah.
Remind me again. Do you have deny?
Yes.
You
Capabilities in Kill Team?
absolutely do have deny the witch.
It never came up since I was playing Harlequins, but
and it's called Cybolt.
Cybolt. Of course it is.
Yes. So right now in the rules, like there's no other options for psychic abilities. They leave it open to, it sounds like there may be expansions that open up a few things. So anyway, that's where we sit right now.
Okay. And then psychic is done. We each did 1 at the most.
Yep.
Or probably none for most factions.
Regardless of how many psychers you have. 1.
And now we move into the shooting phase, and things start getting a lot different now.
So let me kind of take this for a second. So if you recall earlier, Jody talked about, hey, my guy doesn't move, so he's going to ready himself. Okay, great. So let's say Jody has 1 initiative for the game. He's moved a few guys, a couple guys ready themselves. I then move all my guys, a couple guys ready themselves. Now we do psychic. Now we enter shooting phase. Okay, Jody still has initiative, so his first guy who is readied gets to begin shooting.
Yes.
And he does his shooting, and then it switches to me. And now we go to a alternating activation.
Yeah, single model.
But yes, single model. My next guy who is readied gets to fire. If all my guys moved and I have nobody readied, Jody's going to shoot all of his readied guys, and then he's going to take his first shot because he has initiative with his first unreadied guy. Then I'll take a shot with one of my unreadied guys.
Right.
Did I explain that clearly?
Yeah, it's
and I know that
tiers of who's ready to shoot.
Right, and choosing which guys not to move and choosing to have guys ready can have a huge variation.
That's where the strategy, I think, lies.
Yeah. This is for me, this is a callback to Epic Space Marine or Space Marine Epic 40K, the 80s edition with the blue box. It worked on a system very much like this, and it was hands down my favorite thing about that era and that system was this planning ahead of who's going to shoot and are they going to be ready to shoot? Or are they going to... Now, if you were readied and you got charged, you're not shooting because you got charged and you're in close combat now.
Correct.
So that backtracking even a little bit to the movement of prioritizing your charges to take out readied fighters even more so is an interesting layer of tactics.
Yeah, because you're doing that before the shooting phase.
Right.
So you can...
And a point we didn't even mention is this is played on a 22-inch by 30-inch board.
Right, yeah.
So you're in very close confines to each other even to begin with. And
As I know.
Yeah. One other aspect of shooting that's so important and so critical is that there are adjustments to your ability to hit. One of the things that makes your models more survivable in this game is that there's a lot of missing that occurs. There's a lot of, well, okay, this guy is obscured and within 2 inches of his terrain. Like I can only see part of him within, and he's within 2 inches of the terrain that's blocking his view. So I'm now -1 to shoot him. Also, if I am shooting over half the distance of my weapon,
Right.
I'm at long range. So for a bolter, if I'm anything over 12 inches is long range, I'm at another -1. So now my Marine that usually hits on a 3+ is actually hitting that guy on a 5 or better.
Right.
And that makes it, and God help you if you have flesh wounds, which we'll talk about later.
Right.
But so now, while I may fire at this guy one shot, I'm only hitting on a 5 or better. So there's a lot of missing that goes on, but it emphasizes how important cover is in this game.
Yes.
And how important you can have your own guys block more important guys. I really get the sense when I'm playing this of like being in a close quarters firefight and my guys are like shooting around corners and then running up to the next set of cover to shoot around corners. And it really felt like that to me.
Right.
I would agree with that.
Until I got charged by Harlequins.
Yeah, I know. Story
Well,
of my
that
life.
second game we played, we had like a bulldozer bit off of a rhino was just laying in the middle of the road, and I had like 4 orcs piled up behind it, and then they all just, WOG style launched themselves around it at Carl, and his ready guys are blazing away, and it was really, again, those kind of cool cinematic skirmish moments.
Yeah,
So.
for sure.
It's that level of like complexity that we're looking for when you start to go under like the microscope a little bit in these smaller scale battles.
Yeah.
But it doesn't get bogged down by that too much,
No,
right?
no.
Because like the complexity is that -1 to the range or that
For sure.
additional cover. There's nothing else built into that.
And you get pretty quick at calculating it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's
Just
a
like you would at a normal 40K
Yeah.
game.
Yeah,
Like,
It's
it
a
just
-1
becomes
here,
repetitive. Right.
minus
Minus
one here,
one,
plus one there.
And there's like 4 things that stack.
Yeah.
That's it. There's only like 4 modifiers. And once you have them learned, oh, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. Okay. I'm at -2.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
And then very similar to the shooting phase, we go into the fight phase next, which is anybody who's within an inch and is considered to be engaged is fighting with, their opponent. But just like
Shooting,
those who charged will be activated to fight first.
Right.
Really interesting little quirk to mention here. If you have a pistol, you can shoot into close combat, which is just like 40K, as long as you didn't charge and were not charged.
Right.
Which is an interesting little
Yeah,
twist.
basically, the first round you don't get that.
You're hacking and
pistol
stabbing
shot.
and punching. You got to have a minute to square up and draw pistols.
Right.
Which is kind of a fun little twist.
Which in my first couple games I did incorrectly and then caught it and said, oh, yeah, okay, wait, we can't do that.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the rest of the charging is pretty identical to 40K, where it's roll 2d6 and see if you make it. And then, but as you say, you enter this fight phase. All the units that charged alternate their actions until you're into units that are still in combat and haven't charged.
Right.
And then it starts with the guy who had initiative and rolls back and forth through there. Usually the combat at that point is going pretty quick. So, like, I haven't had a guy sit there in close combat for too long.
Weird enough, Brian and I did.
Oh, did you?
And I don't know if it was because we were playing
Is
Dark.
that before, after he cut down your heavy orc?
That was the very last. That was right at the end, man. I thought I was going to pull that thing out, and I have yet to win a game
And what
at
did
Kill
Brian
Team.
play with?
Dark Eldar.
Dark Eldar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which are, by the way, witches are brutal too.
Yeah.
Well, so coolest of the cool. I tried to pull out of combat with a witch with a grot, not with an orc, and a grot tried to run away from a witch and failed the roll because they have that entangling thing, which never comes up in 40K.
Right.
But it came up here, and it was huge because I would have blasted the crap out of that witch. But instead, I was like, oh, God, I got to go bail out my grot. Oh, damn it. And then my work died. But yeah, super, super interesting there. And then we go into morale.
So fight phase is done. We move into morale.
Move into morale, and we're at the end of the turn. Now, interesting enough, that was
Before we talk morale,
6 phases.
wounds.
Oh, yeah.
Wounds
Yeah,
are
right.
very important. Again, what makes models more survivable in Kill Team is this concept of flesh wounds.
Right.
So my Marine gets shot by your Imperial Guardsman, and you successfully wound it, and I fail my save.
Yep.
You, the shooter, now rolls a d6, and on a 1 to 3, my character takes a flesh wound. A flesh wound is going to stack, and every flesh wound gives me a -1 to hit in shooting and in close combat. It also has some impacts in morale, which we'll talk about in a moment. 3 flesh wounds, and I'm out of action, period. 2 flesh wounds, I'm not really hitting anything anyway. And on a 4 to 6, I'm immediately out of action. So you have yet another way of kind of keeping the model around and helping you out. There are some tactical objectives you can spend, command points on that will say, oh, well, if I take this wound and you roll a 6, I'm still, I take no wound or I take a flesh wound or something to that effect. Depends on what army, because those command points are used on these, what do we call them? Tactical.
Just tactics.
Tactics, whatever. I can't remember the exact term. And the interesting thing is there's multiple layers there too.
Yeah. Oh, indeed.
You have a generic layer that everybody has access to. You have a layer of tactics that are only available to your specific army.
Yep.
And then you have yet another layer of tactics that are only available to the specialists in your army.
Right.
And there's like 8 specialists between sniper,
medic,
combatant,
or something.
medic, that offer different benefits, and they're really, really fun to play with. But I do like the diversity of how it makes an army or a force very different than another force.
You could have two Marine forces that behave very, very differently depending on which combatants, even of their limited force selections,
right?
But how they've selected to specialize. Very quickly, you could see by picking certain specializations, which allows you to use certain command points. You could have a force that feels very much like Raven Guard versus Ultramarines versus Blood Angels versus Space Wolves. Right. Very quickly, by just going, I'm going to use these command points more and take this kind of gear, you could see that thematic feel coming through, or not. I mean, you could also just maximize.
And since you're gaining 1 to 2 command points around, if you have a leader around, you always have a leader unless he's out of action or whatever. If your leader's around, you're gaining an extra command point, so you're gaining 2. So I found that I was spending them fairly.
Yep.
I wasn't frugal with them. Like I spend them because I'm,
Yep.
I also have I have a tendency to spend mine defensively. Like, I want to remake that save. I just feel better about that as opposed to I'm going to re-roll that shot.
I'm kind of in the same boat on that one.
Yeah.
Maybe my orc
reactionary almost.
Yeah,
my orc is showing. It's like, no, light them up, boys. Here we go.
Okay, so morale phase.
All right, and this is, I think up front I want to touch on that you and I both felt, and I still feel, this is the only spot the rules do feel a little clunky. That everything else is actually very streamlined. It feels very natural. I've said that many times of 8th Ed that it's in an intuitive rule set that when I play 8th Ed, I go, yeah, that seems like that's how that should work. This is the only time where I went like, wait, what is it? And it took reading through multiple times to get it. Ostensibly, it
part of that is the way the rules are written.
Yeah,
because it takes you through the flow of how it would work. But the funny thing is, when you're reading that flow in your first turn, part of that flow doesn't count.
Right.
Like you have nobody that is in a certain state, but it's telling you check for people in that state. But I'm like, how are people in that state?
Right. Yeah.
So it took reading the whole section.
The short version is this, and in a weird way, maybe an explanation we give will be better than the rule book page, the couple paragraphs that it is. If your warband is either entirely flesh wounded, everybody's been wounded significantly,
or out of action,
you're broken. Now, if half or more are out of action or flesh wounded combined, you're going to roll 2d6 compared to your highest leadership on the table, and if you pass, all is well-ish. If you fail, you are broken, and life is going to be very hard for you from that point on.
A broken army can never unbreak.
Right.
And your guys become shaken, and they can't react when they're shaken, and they have to try to shrug off being shaken, and they deal with
the
minuses.
Potential to be shaken.
They have the potential to be shaken, but once they become shaken, especially as your minuses for losing guys stack up against you, it becomes very hard to become unshaken. There are some things you can do to mitigate this by having other guys nearby to help boost their morale, but it's a bad situation when you break.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it does play into elite versus swarm style armies. So to just continue on through morale, first check to break on this 50% or everybody flesh wounded. Then you move into, you remove all of the shaken markers. And this is where it's weird. You're going, wait, what are shaken markers? Don't worry about it. They haven't happened yet. Go to the next step.
You'll get there.
Yeah. Step 3, anybody who has taken a flesh wound or who is part of a broken warband, checks to see if they lose their nerve. They make what's called a nerve test. They roll a d6, they add a few modifiers or subtract modifiers, and they want to stay below their leadership. The goal is to most leadership tests roll low. And as long as you roll low, all is well. If you fail,
a 1 always succeeds.
It's really important. A 1 always succeeds, because you can end up in a point where literally you cannot pass this test if you have enough fighters out of action.
Right.
Or your guys are isolated. We saw this happen. Literally, my orc could not pass this test without rolling a 1.
Right.
And if you fail this test, your model becomes, see prior step, shaken. And that model may not do anything in the next round. No move, no shoot, no.
He just kind of waits around for the next morale phase to try to become unshaken.
Right. He's quaking in his boots, sucking his thumb, and covering himself behind whatever he can, and hoping for the best. It is a
My
you don't
rubric
wanna be
ring is
there.
just pea dust.
Insert sound effect.
Anyway.
Whistling Dixie.
Oh, well played. So yeah, I agree with you. This is probably the clunkiest part of the
Yeah.
thing. It goes from this very smooth thing to all of a sudden I'm making a lot of rolls just to get through this phase. However, I will also say it's super dependent upon the mission. Like in some missions, as we saw, Austin,
Instantly broken. Done.
Right.
Game's done.
first army
Yep.
to break, game's over. That's it. In a subsequent mission that Jody and I played, it was every round just keep going through this monotonous tool of trying to become unshaken, and it wasn't happening while my guys are just pounding you into the dust. Now, where that's important is in the campaign.
Yeah.
And, I mean, normally you would just say, you know what, call the game, you've won, I'm done. But if I'm just punishing you, it's because I'm trying to get your guys out of action so that hopefully they're permanently out of action when we check during the campaign as to
Right.
what has occurred. Again, I agree. I think this is the one part of the rules system that I was like, oh, well, this is pretty clunky. But I also don't know how to do it better.
Right.
And I think that's kind of where the designer sat was, well, we've
works.
reached the deadline.
Yeah.
Nobody's come up with a better idea. Let's go with it.
And it does. It works.
It does.
It works. It's
brutal.
and it's brutal, and it even feels kind of cinematic. And they're like, man, I hope this guy holds. And there is a lot of consideration of which guy do I see first if he holds his nerve,
For sure.
because it can cascade and get away from you, where guys start breaking, and then that inspires other guys to break
Right.
or shake.
Which is realistic in a way. I
Yeah.
mean, like if all of a sudden your sergeant is like, I'm out of here. All of his privates
probably
are
going
gonna be
with,
like,
right? Yeah.
Well, Sarge is running. I guess things are really bad. You know?
Yeah.
Never let him see you run.
Yeah.
And I hadn't been able to put my finger on what it is that feels off until something you just said, Carl, and it's something that drives me crazy as an orc player. Every once in a while, GW will create some really fun orc rule and roll on this table, and then roll on this table, and then roll on this chart. What happened? Nothing.
Yeah.
And it occasionally feels like that. Okay, roll this, roll that, roll that. Cool. What happened?
Nothing.
Okay, next turn.
I still stand there.
Why did we roll so many dice rolls?
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
And
So-
that's just
I feel like, I mean, you have 5 or 6 activation steps, and they seem like a breeze. And then I got to that one point, and I'm just like, okay, double check the rules. Did I do that again?
Yeah.
Follow the line. And
Yeah.
it just,
Yeah.
and I think it just comes with experience. It'll
Yep.
smooth itself out. But
It will.
that was the hardest part, I think, to wrap my head around.
Yeah.
But
So, okay. I mean, that's basically the rules.
Yep.
You have styles of play. You have open play. You have narrative. You have match, just like they're doing with everything for 40K right now. Again, you can just build a quick 100-point force. All the points and everything are in there, and you can play, hey, let's just play a quick game of Kill Team yours against mine. It also has a campaign system built into it. The campaign system is fairly light. What are you chuckling?
4 pages. All 4 pages.
All 4 pages of the campaign system, fairly light, seems to work. I will say that on our Facebook group this evening, Seth Hancock on the IC's Facebook group posted a point which he says to everyone running Kill Team campaigns, we ran into a problem. You can't recruit specialists. So like once you have specialists in your roster, that's it. You can't ever bring specialists back in. But you have to have a leader in your army when you play. So say you have 2 leaders in your roster and they both die, do you have to completely start your roster over? And that's a really interesting point. I think you could house rule it and say select somebody else to be a leader, but it doesn't address that in the rules. And so as he says, like, it feels like a design flaw. So maybe we'll see an FAQ around that, or maybe we'll see a deeper campaign get introduced.
Like
later.
a supplemental book, or
I've got to imagine they have their ideas. I mean, we already know there's a Rogue Trader expansion coming, which that looks really good.
Buckle up.
Okay. So, I mean, that was kind of all I wanted to throw out there about the campaign in terms of that. You're really fighting over 4 resources, which are much like 8th edition, somewhat abstract, right? You're working with intelligence, which is kind of your army's understanding of what's going on the battlefield, the greater army's understanding. You have material, which is resources and things that the
Supply
army
lines.
supply line, morale and territory.
Yeah.
And if at any point one of these numbers drops to 0, and playing different missions adjusts different resources. So I may fail this mission. If I fail this mission, I lose 2 intelligence.
Right.
If any of those are reduced to 0, your kill team becomes guerrilla.
Right.
At which point you've pretty much lost the game. You can still go and play against other people. There is a long shot chance of everybody going guerrilla, and then it kind of becomes sudden death at that point. But yeah, I mean, you're pretty much out of it, and what it's meant to represent is your forward kill team has failed in its objectives, and the rest of the army can't effectively deploy, so they bug out.
Right. They've stalled out in the greater war effort on the planet.
Right. So I mean, it works. It works. It's not the most deep thing I've ever seen. You could add layers to it
For sure.
You could use Kill Team to add to other 40K campaigns.
That's kind of what I thought too, is kind of build it into a narrative.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Any of the latest Imperial Armor like campaign systems would work fantastic with Kill
Or
Team.
even like before you play a pickup game, right?
Yep.
Let's play a quick kill team to determine our next relic or
Well, that was
X,
something
Y,
I said to Carl was let's do that, and then if you're playing open war, they have the ruse.
Oh,
cards.
yeah.
The winner draws a ruse card.
Yeah, which is can be a pretty significant advantage.
But I mean, would make it pretty juicy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, spice things up a bit.
So along with Kill Team, we have supplemental materials which are coming out. We just talked about the Rogue Trader expansion, which is slated to come out. That's all been talked about openly at the Games Day and that kind of thing. They've launched a series of starter box sets for these guys. Please.
So there's 4 of them so far. You've got Space Marines, because Space Marines. Blessedly.
How do you think about those Space Marines now?
Yeah. Hey, got me in. They pulled me back.
Welcome
you
back,
got orcs. Yeah, brother. You got orcs, then scions and gene stealers dropped this last weekend. Now, I did pick up the orc box on my purchases for Kill Team. I went a little different direction, partly as legitimately, partly as research for the show, and partly as because I wanted those toys.
Research for the show was the excuse. I got the toys.
Yeah, it's
that's okay. Nobody's
great
faulting
tastes that tasted great together. So I picked up the orc box, and it was really neat because in the orc box you get extra tactics and you get a piece of terrain with some orc models. So you get 5 orc Luda boys, and then some terrain and some new tactics cards that are not in the core manual. So 6 more tactics for your orcs to play with. And the terrain has tactics that go with it as well. So the orcs come with a servo hauler, the little tractor truck. And if that's on the table during a game, the orcs can hotwire it and jump in it and take it across the field, which is kind of cool and orky.
Right.
I also picked up the Marine one, and they can detonate a smokestack because they all have the Mechanicum terrain pieces in with them. Or the industrial sector. I can't remember.
It's some of the pieces from the original Shadow Wars Armageddon launch.
Right. And I picked up that kill zone. So rather than getting the main box, which has the Sector Imperialis kill zone, this is the Sector Mechanicum kill zone.
Right.
Now, it's kind of neat just as a fun, like, hey, heads up, because there's 2 of these out now. There's an ammo dump one came out last with the Tyranids and Scions. It's reversible, and on one side you get the Sector Imperialis mat, and then the other side you get the Mechanicum one. So it's reversible. So even if you bought the big box, there's still some buy-in value. And Dawn said it to me in that they get you to chase cards, and it kind of works.
Yeah, they kind of do.
Yeah, but I don't have a problem with it because for $50-$60 you're getting a cool piece of terrain.
Game breaking, to be honest with
no, you're getting a cool piece of terrain. You're getting a unit of guys.
Yeah.
When you kind of math it out, it's a totally reasonable deal.
Yeah.
Comparatively, it's right in line with anything else.
I looked at that board particularly. Like I thought about buying it because I wanted another board, and then I looked at it and I'm like, oh, but I have all this terrain because I already had 2 of the Shadow Wormageddon boxes, and I'm just like, so what I'm looking at paying, and I think it's like $80, and I was like, what I'm looking at paying is $80 for the cardboard playing surface, and I was just like, that's even rich for me,
right?
Especially now that you're going to have access to double-sided mats from Table War that are specifically designed for this. I was just like, I think that's
I'm
going to hedge my money there.
Yeah,
totally.
And if you already have terrain, perfect, because then you've got all the war zones ready to go, or
exactly
kill zones ready to go right there.
Kill zones.
You can pick up faction dice for yours. You need a D10 is the only thing, and you don't really need. It's pretty light.
I was a huge fan of the dice. Actually, came with the set.
because they roll lights out.
Not for me.
Oh well,
Man,
see,
really?
there you go. They're
I
normal
did
dice.
ask Anthony for another set of dice. I'm like, get these away from me.
Funny.
But I think that's just me personally, not the dice. So
even though I'm getting ahead of it, you don't need the dice, but we were talking about Necromunda, though. There you do need the dice.
Yeah,
here
those are
here the
specialized.
dice are an easy pass.
Yeah.
There is a pack of cards, which I think if you didn't buy the big box set, you're probably going to want to pick up this card pack. It has all the tactics cards, the generic ones in it, and then it also has, if you're going to do campaign play, the character tracking cards. And
correct,
you'll have to write on them or not or something. But
here's the other thing I would say: in the very back of the Kill Team book, there is a page of these blank cards that you could copy and just do it on. There's a roster, and then there's the actual cards for the units, for the individual models. So you could just do it on a piece of paper instead of using the cards.
Yep.
Very easily.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's, I think, Kill Team in 37 minutes, which is about how long it takes to play.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right.
So pretty much.
So let's do this. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll kind of compare the two.
Yep.
Give our final thoughts there. Kind of close out the show, and then that'll be that. So we'll be right back.
Hey, this is Big Nasty B from Life After the Cover Save, and I'm at a mall talking to strangers about Table War. Table War develops some of the most innovative products for the miniature wargaming and hobby industry.
And I develop pictures.
That's great. They develop things like the Fat Mat.
Who's Matt, and why is he so fat?
Well, first off, Mat is not a person. The Fat Mat is a tabletop gaming surface, and with over 40 different designs, Table War's Fat Mat has become a community standard.
I got a Surface Pro. It's like 10 inches. By the way, I'm meeting my friend Simbon. Did you know what that is?
No, but I do want to tell you about the Table War Tower case line.
Oh man, towers are so huge.
Well, it's not that kind of tower. It's the original modular, all-in-one display, storage, and transport system for all your tabletop miniatures.
Wow, you're really smart. What's your relationship status?
Well, it's complicated, but you know what isn't complicated?
Chili dogs.
This is true, but also the Macromat.
Oh geez, not that guy again.
The Macromat is a one-of-a-kind, innovative photography backdrop, perfect for collectibles, hobby miniatures, and small works of art. Its durability, portability, and functionality in one inexpensive product.
I wasn't paying attention to what you just said, but do you validate parking?
No, I do not. But if you want more information, head over to tablewar.com and check them out.
Table War!
We're back, and I've already learned I've been doing some things wrong as Jody has schooled me on some of the rules. Earlier I said you get that cover save when you are within 2 inches of terrain. I believe I said that is not true. The -1 to the cover save if you're obscured.
Yeah.
If you're obscured, regardless of how far you are from the terrain, you get the opponent shooting at you takes a -1 to hit.
Right.
But when you roll the to wound roll, if you're within an inch of the terrain, you have a -1 on that to wound roll. So
Right.
chances are you are now only being wounded on a 5 or 6.
Right.
Which is incredible, by the way, for Necrons. Because on a 6 on Necrons, they repair
Oh,
and remove all their wounds.
dirty.
So
Dirty.
then you're
Wow.
only on a 5. Oh my God. You're basically, oh man, that's rough. Anyway, okay, so I think we'll take a few minutes. We'll kind of talk comparatively about Necromunda versus Kill Team. As I said, there's been this discussion ongoing about how many skirmish games does 40K or GW need, and are they cannibalizing each other as a result of that. I think that between these two, and I'll just start by saying, I think between these two, as I said earlier, they kind of scratch different itches.
Yeah.
And they provide vastly different experiences, both in terms of time to play, in terms of what you enjoy out of a particular game.
Right.
I like them both for different reasons. I like the crunch and detail level of Necromunda. I like that Kill Team feels so familiar, plays very fast, and gives me the opportunity to, hey, maybe I want to, I'm well documented as saying I don't like Tau, but I sure like Fire Warriors. I think they look neat. Hey, it might be kind of fun just to paint up a Tau Fire Warrior squad and leave it at that. Or, hey, I've been thinking about doing Gene Skiller Cult Army. Well, if I start with this little squad, let's see how I feel about this, and then go from there. Austin, let's go to you.
Honestly, I have my handwritten notes in front of me, and you hit on pretty much all three of the things that I pulled away from these two games. And the first one being the time commitment. The one of the positive things that I pulled away from Kill Team was I could finish a game in 30 to 60 minutes max after learning the game, if not sooner, if I get myself kicked out pretty quickly based on pulled dice rolling, right? So I'm thinking about
the key is just keep rolling 6s.
Yeah, exactly, right? I go through so many dice, though. But thinking about like my current state in my life of playing games, like that 30 to 60 minute game is doable.
Yeah.
Necromunda, for me, instantly on paper, I am super attracted to that game because of the rich background, the narrative, the buy-in, the complexity. And yeah, I occasionally do have that 2.5, 3 hours to spend. Now, the commitment buy-in that I get from maybe a group of friends to get that long campaign is a little bit trickier to get, right? Yeah. The second point I made was kind of the ease of getting into it, which I just kind of touched on that. The ease of getting into a game. Like the Kill Team, I already got a couple Kill Teams sitting at home, if not 4,
What's your level of investment?
Right.
And
you know what?
For the rule book.
And honestly, like that Ultramarines Kill Team I have sitting at home, I can make that pretty complex, and I don't have to go out and buy new models.
Right.
I can sit there and pen and paper it and read the rules and think about strategies through tactics, through specialist abilities, how I use command points and things like that. The ease of game of just setting up on my coffee table with my wife while our son takes a nap is pretty appealing to me.
Right.
I'm not lugging out a 6x4 table, bringing out a bunch of terrain, bringing out my cases and things like that. The last point that I want to make between the two, that I'm going to side with probably the Kill Team instantly on this, is just being able to demo it in the sense of I'm bringing a new board game friend of mine who's 40K curious, so to speak. I can say, hey, why don't we just try Kill Team? It's a little different. You get some flavor. That's for the new player. But maybe for a veteran player or somebody like me who's been here playing the game for a year now, who's now curious on, hey, those Necrons look pretty cool, or something outside of the Imperium scale, I'm going to give them a try and just see what the flavor is, or just see what it feels like to paint them and kind of dive in the narrative that way a little bit. Those were the three takeaways. But I think ultimately Necromunda, for me, it's hard because the buy-in's tough for my friends, money-wise, time commitment, but I think it still attracts me because of the complexity level. However, I think Kill Team kind of scratches that itch to some degree, too.
It's an interesting point. In our group, too, like we run the gamut of almost every army.
Right.
So if you ever wanted to like just say, oh, I want to know how Necrons play, well, Aaron would be like, well, here,
right.
What do you go ahead and make up your Kill Team how you want it. Here, I'll bring the models. You give it a try. You can even borrow them for a while. He's got a bajillion Necrons. Right. So, I mean, it makes it very easy for us to experiment, try different flavors a little bit here, a little bit there. Jody.
Yeah, along those lines, just to stick with that notion of entry level or ease of access to Kill Team, I think in a lot of ways Kill Team represents something we've all wanted or have always kind of wanted from 40K that hasn't really ever been there. That notion of I can just play on the dining room table. I can literally, and I'm not playing some kind of 40K. No, I'm playing a full real engrossing game. And I will criticize the older versions of Kill Team in that they didn't feel that way to me. And for those of you who enjoyed it, that's awesome. Keep rocking. But for me, Kill Team always felt like, no, I'm playing some hanky, thrown together, trying to make it work game. This game feels very robust, very complete, but I can play it on a coffee table comfortably with room to spare. Also, there's never been a game from GW. If I'm little 13-year-old me walks into a game store and sees a box of whatever, Space Marines, because I'm a 13-year-old little dude, and I see my box of Space Marines and I go, these are the coolest thing ever, and I beg and plead, for the first time ever, that store owner can say, you know what, come back and build them, or go home and build them and come back and we can play.
We could play a little bit, yeah.
For real. Yeah. Not like, here's some little thrown together.
Not here, roll force.
Right. But here's the game for real. Yeah. You can play. And if you like it, here's a rule book and you're good to go.
Yeah.
That's never been a thing before.
That is a really good point. And I think, to kind of talk about that, a lot of people and we've even mentioned it a couple times during the show of, well, what about Shadow Wars Armageddon? Well, I think you can consider that dead.
Yeah.
It felt like when I look at it, it feels like a placeholder. I'm not quite sure where they were going with that. This certainly replaces what they were attempting there with much more forethought and with the plans to expand upon it on a regular basis. I mean, you can see if you go to the Kill Team section of Games Workshop's website, this is everything we're expanded on it so far. We know for a fact there are further expansions coming for it already. It is something that's going to be supported. But from a marketing standpoint, you hit the nail on the head. And it does make it easier to draw people into the game. I heard some people on our group saying, yeah, but it's not really 40K. No, it's not.
No,
right. But that's fine. Once you have the fundamentals of this down and you were playing this, if you were brand new to the hobby,
the next step is 40K.
Next step is 40K. Hey,
that's a different avenue, right?
Now we're going to introduce tanks and all these things.
Yeah.
Okay, don't worry about those minuses you took to hit because on this scale, it's a little more abstract, but it's larger. But you get to play with tanks and planes and all that kind of stuff,
and way cooler heroes.
Yeah. And okay, continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's and I wanted to echo on. Kill Team's really deep. Like the more I start looking at it and thinking about it, the little hamster wheel of circular reasoning through things keeps spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning between, kind of as you said, Austin, those combinations of specialists and things. Yeah. To switch back to Necromunda, I think Necromunda, I was listening to a board game podcast and they had an interesting take on why as reviewers, they don't review things that were on Kickstarter. And the reasoning behind that was that the people who kickstarted that board game already decided they like it, and they're interested,
right.
And the people who didn't aren't. So what are they reviewing?
Right.
And not to undo
a few people here or there may not have picked it up during the Kickstarter,
and not to undo our earlier conversation, but I feel like that's where Necromunda lives. If you like that richness, if you like that depth, you want that role-playing immersive sensation from your tabletop battle, Necromunda's for you, and you're going to love it, and it's going to be awesome, and enjoy it. Mm-hmm. But you kind of already know whether you're going to like that or not.
Yeah.
Like and as Austin, as you said, that price point is so prohibitive that if I go, I'm not going to buy a rule book for Necromunda, I need to buy a gang. I need to buy the Gang War supplement that has the rules for my gang.
So there's $70 or so.
I need to buy the cards.
Yep.
Now there's Forge World add-ons.
Well, we haven't.
Yeah.
And I do kind of need those dice. I'm at $100 plus.
That's very true. That's very true.
Compared to, from a price point, compared to Kill Team, buy a $35 5-man squad of intercessors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Jeff pointed this out. Actually, he and I were talking online about this.
Before or after he was complaining about the prices.
No, it was a price thing that he was excited about.
Okay.
Go buy First Strike, 40K First Strike.
Yeah.
That comes with 3
He was very
Reavers,
excited about
3
that particular
Primaris, 3 Plague Marines, and a handful of the zombie dudes.
Yeah.
That's 2 playable kill teams, almost.
Yeah.
Interesting little side note, a knock on Kill Team, because we've been pretty pro Kill Team here. I feel like the box sets with the Scions expansion or those are in most cases, those are not full Kill Teams in those boxes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you don't get enough dudes.
That's interesting.
The Marine one with its 5 Reavers, you can. The Scions one, absolutely not.
But they're also certainly not optimized, right? I mean,
and the same is true actually. The Neophyte, the Gene Stealer cult in the core box, is not 100 point, not even close to 100 point kill team. So there is some, hey, buyer beware. You might want to check that out in advance. Look for a buddy's copy. And I think I'll just echo something. Oh, I did want to bring up one last little kind of weird. Maybe people can banter online about it. I mentioned earlier that like there might be some clues about the future, and I think Necromunda. Right. If you look at the way Necromunda ruled out, because Carl, you mentioned earlier about like it's odd that they rolled it out the way they did. That you get this $120-something core box just to get the rules, and going back to that idea of people who are going to want to do this already know they're going to want to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is the template for specialist games. Blood Bowl has followed this pattern. You need to buy the core Blood Bowl box, and then you go buy your additional team. And the Spike magazine that has your additional team rules. All those things are not, you need supplemental books. And, so I think it'll be interesting to maybe watch as Titanicus rolls out, as it's the next specialist game with additional Forge World support, much like Necromunda and Blood Bowl have this additional Forge World support behind it. It may roll out in that kind of way where it's, look, you already know you like this thing. So we are going to ask for a little more investment up front. And I think there are some missteps with Necromunda that hopefully the other systems will learn from, of the campaign rules not being in the core. Right. Because if you wanted to play Necromunda, you wanted to play a campaign.
For sure.
That's what it's for.
That was kind of disappointing that the campaign rules weren't included.
Yeah, and a lot of people were unhappy about it.
Yeah.
So I think that was just kind of an interesting fruit for thought, something I've been mulling over, that idea of this may be the specialist game template of how things are going to roll out. And we'll see twists and turns because GW is really responsive right now to what's working and what's not working. But I think the bottom line for me is I'm just not at a point in my gaming life or age where I could invite over buddies, 4 or 5 buddies that will reliably show up like a role-playing group every week to play Necromunda.
Right.
I just don't have that kind of time or that reliability, or
except during the summer.
Even during the summer. The reality is I could, but that gaming time is so precious to me now that it's hard to justify that time commitment for me personally. Okay. If somebody else wants to be the arbiter and set that thing up.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, maybe if you're not running it, right?
Yeah.
But somebody else summer would be the time to do, we're going to do summer Necromunda campaign for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever.
Right. And I'm super geeked about the idea of Blood Bowl I'm a longtime Blood Bowl league commissioner.
Yeah.
The idea of a campaign in a day, be it for Kill Team or Necromunda or Blood Bowl, that notion of in one day, everybody show up early. We found a venue and we're going to play till late. Yeah. But we're going to do a whole thing today.
Yeah.
And we're going to walk away.
And I would say you would make a lot of progress in Kill Team.
Oh my God.
In a day, if you committed a whole day to that. Whereas Necromunda, you're going to get 3-4 games in.
Right. Same with Blood
Kill
Bowl.
Team, you're going to knock out a ton of games really fast.
I think with the 4-page campaign system that's in Kill Team, I think you could probably play a literal whole campaign in a day.
At least a couple people be knocked out.
Yeah. So for sure.
I'm very curious to see where they go from here. I would love to see some expansion on the campaign system a bit, but it is not bad where it stands right now. Your guys gain experience, they gain abilities. In matched play, your specialists can only be level 1, but in open and narrative play, they can spend those experience and become level 2, level 3 guys. And the interesting thing is the way their skills open up. It's like a tree, so you're one specialist who's a sniper could be totally different than another specialist that's a sniper. It just makes for some very interesting
it kind of reminded me of like a video game.
Yeah, exactly.
Like leveling up a character almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Okay, so any other points you want to bring up before we kind of wrap up the show?
I just wanted to say a quick thank you to Chris Wolf in Santa Cruz. He had an extra set of the Necromunda Gang Wars 1, 2, and the White Dwarf with the Gene Stealer cult rules.
Oh, nice.
So I was not going to bite the $125 bullet. Plus, as research, I had the old Necromunda rules, but he hooked me up and let me get up to speed on all the new ins and outs, and got me excited to play it again. I hope I get an opportunity to.
Cool.
But thanks a lot, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Very cool.
Anything left to add for you?
Yeah, nothing on my part.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to the Independent Characters episode 174. We hope you have enjoyed it. Please remember that there is the code that you can use for a further 10% discount on Table War fat mats, in particular the Kill Team mats, double-sided. They're awesome. There's no reason Kill Team has to take place in a city. And these mats also offer several other options for other types of terrain. You just need a lot of terrain is all you really need. So that IC code again is IC 2018-08. It is good for the month of August. So between that and the $5 off that they're offering right now on those, you're basically getting $10 off a $55 mat. You're getting it for $45. It's two-sided. And yeah, if you buy that 4-pack of the 4 mats they have, it would go for $220, but you're getting $40 off of that, plus an additional 10% if you use our coupon code. So that comes out to about $162. That is a good deal.
That's pretty good
cool.
hookup.
Yeah, that's a good deal. So if you can do it, help our guys out over there at Table War, Doug and Todd. They're great guys, and they're trying to help provide and support Kill Team. So, okay, with that said, let's go ahead and just wrap it up real quick. So this is Carl.
This is Austin.
This is Jody.
And we're coming to you from the Astronomicon, where you can get in as many games of Kill Team as you want.
Or even specialty dice won't get you the dice rolls that you need.
And we're a Kill Team so good, even I'm painting Marines.
I think that's the biggest point right there. This episode of The Independent Characters is protected by the Creative Commons license. If you have further questions as to its use, you can find information on the front page at theindependentcharacters.com.
pray for you.